Thank you. Very warm and lively song service, worship time. I want to say good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our visiting friends. If you're here this afternoon, we want to give you a warm and cordial welcome. It is good that we could come back this afternoon because I think that what we're going to be talking about this afternoon will, in one way or another, affect every one of us, either indirectly or directly. Because all of us know somebody who has had cancer at some point in their lives, and it's very important. Sometimes, we need to remember prevention is better than cure. Anything we can do to prevent or to help us along the journey, it's always better. So it's my pleasure to welcome Doctors Facey, both. I am overjoyed to introduce Dr. Facey. I thought with a female at this time. I know she's very shy and she doesn't like the accolades and all the rest of it, but I think it's very pertinent for me to do that. I am so delighted that I have the privilege of introducing her because when I was youth director, she was one of the shining young people. And interestingly, I'm not just her youth director anymore, I'm her friend, and I can say that without any fear of contradiction. And whenever we have anything to bounce off each other, she'll call me and say, what do you think about this? And I'll call her and say, what do you think about this? But it's a pleasure to have been involved in both of their lives. Now, as a youth director, you see many things happening. And some of the events that happened as a youth director, they were both together at these events. And I made a prophecy that some of these young people would be married. And in January, I married both of them. So that prophecy came through, okay? So they're now together. And they thought that the prophecy probably wouldn't come through, but it has come through. So it's husband and wife now. So you can say I did play a part in it. So it's a joy to... One of the things I want to say about Dr. Alita is that, apart from her being humble, I don't really want to say much about that because that is without saying. She's a very authentic, solid Seventh-day Adventist person. I don't see that in many people who in this medical field necessarily. Some of them waver. But it's one of the few Adventist doctors that I know, I'm not saying that there isn't any others, that I know that have spirituality as well as she deals with practicality and with health. And I want you to know that God will continue to bless you as you do His business, because He has called you to do this, not anybody else. And as you continue to minister, it's a ministry. It's not just being a doctor. It's a ministry that you're providing. And God will bless all of us through the ministry that we'll be providing this afternoon. And our health will be much better because of what transpires here this afternoon. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Disconnected myself. good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all had a good lunch. What I was going to do first, I know that I was asked to present reducing the risk of cancer, and I'm a cancer surgeon, so my job is, if there's a cancer, I take it out and I reconstruct it. And that's lots of different types of cancers. So cancer is something that I deal with day in and day out, and hopefully help to counsel my patients with, and we'll talk about that. But what I wanted to first touch upon, which goes with this morning's session, was about Health God's Way, which is an introductory kind of presentation that I'm going to do. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about health, and I've asked Simon to also help me with this as well. So I'm just going to quickly go, I don't know if you can see the thing too well because it's quite bright, but we're going to pray before we do anything first of all. So dear Jesus, we thank you for your message that you've given to us, and I pray that as we learn today, that not only will we learn for ourselves, but we'll learn for our families, our friends and this community. Amen. Amen. So, you know the saying, you can have all the money in the world, but you can't buy health, yeah? And it's so true, okay? And I just wanted to talk about the Adventist health message and what we actually have, because I don't think we appreciate it. It's been proven through, but you know, people in Loma Linda, it's a blue, I don't know if you've heard of this thing called the Blue Zones. It was on BBC a couple of years ago, that Adventists live approximately 10 years longer. That's Adventists who are following the health message, by the way, not just because you're baptised in the church. So there is a health message that God has given us, and I talked to you this morning about having learning what this health message is and where you can find it. So you can find it, if you don't have these books, and some of you may have the books, in the Bible. The Bible is the original medical textbook. If you can imagine, if you had a car and you get your nice little car manual that tells you what to do, what this light means if it's flashing, and etc., etc. The same thing is in the Bible, and as we read this morning, God has said that if we will listen to what he has said, none of these diseases will come upon you. And I talked briefly about how the Egyptian mummies, when they moved them to out of the, what do they call them, out of the pyramids, and there's a study where they put the mummies in a CT scan, which is a type of imaging thing. So they didn't want to open the caskets or take the bandaging off because it's obviously just dust underneath there, where it's actually just preserved. But they looked at the CT scans and they realised that these Egyptians had many of the modern diseases that we're now experiencing. So things like heart disease, dental disease, probably evidence of hypertension, evidence of strokes. Things that we would call modern day diseases, the Egyptians had, the rich Egyptians had. And they found out that their diet was very high in pork, very high in sugar and honey, because they had all these luxuries, compared to the poorer slave Egyptians who were also buried there, who probably had a more humble diet of grains and vegetables, as it were. And it's very interesting that God says that none of these diseases of the Egyptians will I put upon you if you follow the original diet that he's given to us. So we believe that God has our best interests at heart. We believe that God is a personal God, yes, that God cares about our health, and God has given us instructions about how to care for our body and our minds in the Word of God, which is the Holy Bible. And a healthy body gives you the freedom to think better, and this is God's health way. So what is health? Because health is this word that we use, but what does it actually mean? Well, the World Health Organization describes it as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. But in order to be healthy, we need to make intelligent lifestyle choices, okay? So it's important for us to make these choices to be healthy, and God has given us ways and how to do that. We know that some diseases are genetic. We're going to talk about that when we talk about cancers, and that means that some cancers run in families. So your mum might have had it, your father, his father, etc., etc. But most modern day diseases, or what we call non-communicable diseases, are preventable with a close study of God's word and God's guidelines. And we believe that good health can be broken down into the following points, of which we call New Start. It's a way of easy acronym to remember it, New and Start. And so many of you may be familiar with this, but for those who are not, we advocate good nutrition, which follows the guidelines which you find in Genesis chapter 1, verse 29, which the original diet that God gave to man was seeds and grains and fruits. That was the original diet. We know that after sin, that vegetables were included, so ground provisions, as we like to call it. And then after the flood, meat was introduced into the diet. But even then, when meat was introduced into the diet, the human diet, God still had specific ways of how the meat should be eaten, so how the animal should be killed, so that they should be slaughtered with the blood taken out and drained, and the only specific types of animals should be eaten. So God has given us that specific instruction of how to do that. We also talk about exercise and the need for us to exercise regularly, and it's one of the things we focus a lot in the church about what foods we should eat and what we shouldn't eat, but actually exercise is really, really important. I deal with a lot of patients who, a part of my work as well, is people who have got weight problems, massive weight loss. I'm talking about obese, super obese people, and they're not able to exercise because they're so heavy. But you try to help them with their nutrition, and then you also try to encourage them with different types of exercises that they can do. But exercise, if you do that, will help you more so than the limitation of calories to lose weight. Exercise also has benefits in helping heart health, helping brain health, and we'll talk a bit about that. Even your digestive health, if you're running regularly, it will help to regulate your digestion. Good water, good access to water. We're privileged that we have water that is relatively clean, although it's chlorinated and fluoridized, etc., but at least we have clean water that we can have, and it's so important that we have water in our bodies. Adequate sunshine, temperance, which means the abstinence of certain things, so we would like that to smoking, alcohol, use of illicit drugs, caffeine, which is a really big problem, fresh air, adequate rest. It's very important. A lot of our healing happens when we're sleeping, so it's important that we do get the adequate rest, and God has given us 1 day out of 7 that we should be able to abstain from all of our labours and rest, and I'm very grateful for the Sabbath. And also trust in God. Some people you may hear say trust in a higher power. No, we trust in Jesus here. And sorry if you're not Christian and you've come here, but this is what I believe. You can take it or leave it, but this is what I believe. So this is just an illustrated way of looking at that. And the trust in God is really important because it's about emotional well-being. As I said this morning, a lot of people are stressed, and there is stress that we have in our families, and there's stress that is put on us by the media cycle, and people are in constant fear. And when you're in this constant stress environment, it predisposes you to cancers. And one of the things I always tell my patients is they say, I give them the diagnosis of cancer, they freak out, what's going to happen to me? And I say, there's nothing that you can do that is going to make, you worrying about it is not going to make you any better. I say, there's nothing you can do by worrying. The phrase I use is, nothing good ever came by worrying. So let me worry, let me get the grey hairs, I have to fix the problem. You don't worry about it. If you trust me, we can work together and try and heal this situation. But stress management is a really important part of my role with patients, because I had 2 patients, I'll give this example. Both of them had the same very bad stage of cancer. Both of them had the same treatment. One was extremely fretful, could not calm her down at all, got the nurses in, stressed about this, stressed about that, etc., etc. The other one was able to trust. What happened is that 4 months later, I was doing the scans, after we'd done the treatment, did the scans. The first one who was fretting so much, she had complications of infection after the surgery, he had a really bad, torrid time. We did her scans afterwards, she had developed a new bowel cancer, which was unheard of. We was not expecting that at all. And she died 6 months later because that secondary diagnosis just absolutely floored her. She died within 6 months. The other one is still alive today and is still, even though she has got quite a nasty prognosis and I've had to do a bit more treatment for her, she has a very positive outlook. And it's so true that your outlook and how you think and how you process things, this stress response I talked about this morning, the stress response, i.e. this is a bad thing that's happening to me, how do I internalise it, how do I process it, what choices am I going to make, what decisions am I going to do, what is my outlook, will have a significant impact on how you heal and how you basically get through these traumas that are happening. So, some Bible texts, because we need to bring the medical textbook in here. The Bible tells us a merry heart is good medicine. And you'll know this if you've seen people who've got some kind of diagnosis, cancer, and they're really like, oh, woe is me, they go down really quickly. But those who've got kind of a more positive outlook, even though it's desperate and it's terrible, they can do better. And the Bible tells us that a broken spirit drains your strength. And who's ever been around a miserable person? Makes you miserable, doesn't it? You try to cheer them up, and everything's, it's really bad. And it just makes you feel miserable. You think, I don't want to visit them again. So a merry heart is good medicine. And a broken spirit can drain not only your strength, but those around you who are trying to help you. Also in Proverbs it tells us that a cheerful countenance or a cheerful heart makes others happy, and good news refreshes the body. Isn't that true? Isn't it great to hear good news? It makes you feel fantastic. So I'm going to go through each of these things, so nutrition and healthy eating. If we're not aware of it, I've mentioned Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 9, which talks about the seeds, the fruits, the nuts, the grains is what God has told us originally. That's the perfect diet that he gave to Adam and Eve. So if you can imagine you've created human race, you give them the best because he said everything was good. So God is not going to give a diet that was healthy or lacking, unhealthy or lacking. He gave them the best diet. But if we are going to choose to eat meat and how we're going to do it, then what we should eat is found in Leviticus chapter 11. And God talks about what types of animals to eat. So, for example, he talks about animals that chew the grass, have a cloven foot. So we're talking about things like lamb or sheep or beef. If we're going to eat that, or chickens, he talks about birds and the type of birds we can eat, which are clean or unclean. And he also talks about the type of fish that we can eat, which are clean or unclean. And the fishes, or the sea life, is things that have got scales and they've got fins. And that makes logical sense when you think about it scientifically, because things like lobsters and shrimps, that their processes is that they filter the water and they clean the water to make the sea clean. So if they're kind of like the filters or the sewage system, you wouldn't want to eat that. You wouldn't want to eat that because all the waste is within them. It's the same with a pig. In Barbados, where my grandma comes from, her sister owns pigs. Not long anymore, unfortunately, she's passed away, but she owns pigs, and we used to feed the pigs everything that our leftovers. And me and my brother, I remember one of the pigs, there's 2 pigs in the pen, one of the pigs defecated in the pen, and we were like, oh, we was kids. And then the other one came and ate the poo behind it, and we were like, oh, this is before I was at Adventures Work, we're not eating bacon anymore. Because we saw it with ourselves, and even then before we were like, no, we're not eating pigs anymore. But the pig is there to clean the earth, and all these other animals, they're there. All the animals have their place in this ecosystem, some to clean and some to provide. So that's why God gave us these principles. Adventists, we have a history of creating the whole grain breakfasts and cereals, which were in the 1800s with Harvey Kellogg, who was an absolute pioneer in the health message. And if you read his work of what he did in the sanitarium, Battle Creek, not only that, but not just in health and eating, but what he did also with helping prostitutes come out of prostitution, what he did in helping the homeless, what he did in feeding orphans and things like that. This all forms a part of the health message. It's not just about what we eat. It's a bigger thing that we need to look at. And as I've said, a healthy body leads to a healthy mind and relieves the stress associated with bad health. Going on to water, our bodies contain nearly up to 3/4 of water, depending on our body size and our sex. And water is essential for drinking, cleanliness and good health. We can survive about 2 to 4 minutes without oxygen, about 7 days without water, but we can survive about 3 months without food. Christ emphasised how important water is when he says, "Whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never thirst, but the water that I shall give him will become a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." Water is essential. Sunshine. Sunshine in moderation is needed for the synthesis of vitamin D. Vitamin D is not a vitamin, it is a hormone, and it is imperative in our bodies. It helps to give us healthy bones, but it also helps to reduce the risk of certain cancers. So all my patients will get a vitamin D test to see where the vitamin D levels are. Most of them are deficient. There are many studies that show that if you've got a low vitamin D level, your risk of cancer increases, and with melanomas, which is one of the primary tumours I treat, if you have a low vitamin D level, then your risk of recurrence is much higher. So everybody will get a test, and then we'll moderate and regulate their vitamin D. Just a note about vitamin D: if you take vitamin D, you should not take it with calcium. Okay, vitamin D needs to be taken on its own, and you also should take magnesium because it helps with the absorption and helps to upregulate it. Sunshine is important, but for those of us who are fairer skinned, it's also important that we don't get burnt, because getting burnt, or what we call UV damage, is also what causes cancer. Because when you get burnt, you cause damage to the DNA. The DNA eventually will start to throw off cancers. So it's important that when we do get the sun, that we get it at the appropriate time. So don't be a mad, they say mad dog's an Englishman in the sun, and it's true when I go on holiday. But just make sure you're not out in the midday sun. Wear a broad-brimmed hat, get adequate sun, use clothing to protect yourself. Sun creams are fine to a degree, but you do need to have some vitamin D. Sometimes patients get so scared of the sun, with the skin cancers at least, that they completely cover themselves, and then they become even more vitamin D deficient. So you have to have things in moderation. And I'll just say for people with darker skins, it's important that you get your vitamin D even more, because it's the main way of getting vitamin D from the sun. It's harder to convert the body to convert with melanated skin, so you still need to have that sun exposure. So temperance or self-control is one of what we call the fruits of the spirit. So if you're not familiar with it, this text in Galatians talks about one of the results of having God in your life is love, joy, peace, and also self-control is one of these. In the 1800s, Seventh-day Adventists were advocating abstinence from tobacco, when physicians were saying if you've got a chesty cough, smoke a cigarette and that will help it. But Adventists were actually saying no, this is not good. They're also advocating that we shouldn't be drinking tea or coffee because of the caffeine in that. I know that for some people it's out of vogue, but that is the original message. Caffeine is not good for you, and again, in certain types of surgeries, I will ask my patients not to have any caffeine at all, because it will have an adverse effect on the results of their surgery. I myself do not partake in caffeine. Apparently I'm probably one of the few doctors who don't do it, but you know what, I feel healthy for it and I can still go on. And alcohol, again, we know that Adventists were advocating abstinence from alcohol, and we know that there's always conflicting studies about a glass of wine a day will help your heart, and then you can hear things that shouldn't have any alcohol. I think you was reading a study that says the safe amount of alcohol we should be having is 2 teaspoons. Yeah. 2 teaspoons a day from some study, which is no more than 2 teaspoons, which is nothing. So if you want to get the health effect from red grapes, then just drink red grapes. You don't have to have it fermented. But we were advocating that and those lifestyle choices. Modern science now agrees with these findings. It's now been shown that the Adventist lifestyle with self-control actually improves longevity. Not only does it improve longevity, but healthy longevity. You don't want to be living to 100 years, but you're feeling a bit rough and you're in a nursing home and you need to be cared for. We're talking about people who are living long and living healthier. Good hygiene. God cares about hygiene and means that we need to live in clean surroundings. They say cleanliness is next to godliness. It's not in the Bible, but we all know it. And it's actually quite apt for a healthy life. And again, in the book of Leviticus, you'll see how God has told people how they must clean the camp, what they must do if this happens, etc., etc. All about cleanliness. And if we have a dirty or damp environment, this is associated with poorer health. And again, Adventists were advocating these things. Adequate rest. God promises rest when we come to Him. A lack of rest increases our stress levels. Stress depresses the immune system. If you have a depressed immune system, you're more prone to cancers and illnesses. It's advised that an adult should have an average of 8 hours rest a day, but as you get, as you are younger, the younger ones need more. And some studies have shown that we benefit from an afternoon nap like our European friends. I would love an afternoon nap at the moment. When we are sleeping, we should make sure that the room is ventilated, free from distractions to ensure a good night's sleep. And I have other presentations on each of these things separately, which unfortunately I won't be able to do today. And then I've talked about trusting God, that when God says you trust in Him with all your heart and understanding, He will direct our paths, and it will be health to our navel and marrow to your bones. So there truly are benefits in following the Lord. As He says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that you may prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers." So that's the end of that presentation. Is there any questions at the time? Okay.
Yeah, could you... Sorry, maybe other people will ask first before I ask.
Does anybody have any questions before Pastor?
Yes.
Yes.
I have one.
Yeah.
We're
going to wait for the microphone to come.
Microphone.
I know. I know. It's very posh in here, isn't it? There we go.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you very much for all of what you said. I believe that all that works together. I had cancer 6 years ago. I had prostate cancer. And I also had hormone treatment as well. Before that, I heard that there are 1 or 2 secrets in cancer itself.
No, what? Sorry.
1 or 2 secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Secrets, yeah. You mentioned Genesis chapter 6. Was it 6:1?
Chapter 1 and chapter 9 I mentioned.
Yes. It says the seed of the common fruit. Now, the seed of the common fruit is vitamin B17.
Yes.
And you know that.
Yeah,
B17.
yeah.
And vitamin B12 is cyanocobalamin.
Mm-hmm.
So that cyano has been taken out of it at the moment. It is just known as cobalamin.
Mm.
Well, I take vitamin B17 supplement. Bits of apricot kernels,
Yeah.
the seeds of the common fruit. And I must say, eating 2 a day, just eating that small amount, giving my body alkaline, has removed the malignancy.
Amen. Yeah.
So I've actually proved what you said
Yeah.
in that if you eat the seed of the common fruit, which is apples, the strongest one is apricot kernels,
Yeah.
which you can't get anymore. It's getting increasingly more difficult.
They're trying to ban it, yes.
So I'm wondering why.
They're trying to ban it, yes.
Can you stop them from doing that?
No, it's this thing with the EU. I know that we're now out of the EU, but I have a testimony of a friend. Well, she became a friend. She was actually a patient of mine. She had breast cancer. She had a very severe, very rare but very severe breast cancer. And the story was that I was at the time a medical student, and I had to see her. And this lady was so calm, and I said to her, "You're so calm," because most women were freaking out. And she said, "Oh, because the Lord is with me." And we prayed together, and we became friends. And we were doing research and stuff, and this vitamin B17 and the apricot, it's the cyanide that's in these seeds, It's being shown, and there are actually scientific studies that prove that vitamin B17 and cyanide in it is very helpful for it. But I think from the EU point of view, they try to regulate the supplements that you have. And a lot of things that we used to have probably about 10 years ago have been banned or highly regulated by the EU. I don't know what effect Brexit will have on that now that we're not in the EU, but as I was saying this morning, there is a conspiracy of health. Things like the natural elements. If I was to say I can cure cancer, I would be, and I'm not saying I can, but if I was to say that, I would be, I'd have my licence removed, because by definition you can't cure cancer, you only can put people into remission. So there are like certain, as it were, health groups that have a high regulatory kind of monopoly on what it is, and that is linked to the drug companies. There's a lot of money to be made from cancer, and if you've got something as simple as B17 kernel, it's going to put a lot of chemotherapy agents and radiotherapy that you have for prostate cancer and hormonal treatments and the new ones that are coming out. It's going to put a lot of people out of business. So that's probably why it's not so easy to find out. I know that some more studies are being done, and probably you'll find that they'll try to isolate that compound and make it into a drug. I'm sure that will happen very soon. It's happened with a lot of medications that we have, that they isolate certain things and then they turn that into some form of medication. I forgot to say, as well as the book Ministry of Healing I spoke to today, this book, I don't know if you've seen it, it's called Back to Eden. Yeah. It's called Jethro Kloss. It's an old book, but it's a very, very good book, which he talks about how to treat diseases with herbs and how to do that. You can get this on Amazon, and I managed to get a few copies from Amazon, and it talks about just simple remedies that you can use to help treat different diseases. Talks about which herbs are used for which reason, which trees even, because there's like not just even the leaves of the trees, but you can even use the bark for certain things. So this is a very good book on how to use it. It talks about vitamins, what they're used for, nuts, salts, because there's different types of salts as well. Some salts are good for you, some salts are not good for you. And we sometimes have a blanket thing that if you've got hypertension, take out salt out of your diet. But actually there's other salts that can actually help regulate that sodium level that you've got. Like for example Himalayan salt, which is very high in potassium, so it helps to drive the sodium out, for example. And then it also gives you, if you're very new and you don't know how to cook, it even gives you recipes of how to make some simple foods for yourself to help you. So if you've not got this book in your house, this is a really good book to use, which is called Back to Eden. As well as Ministry of Healing by Ellen White, Medical Ministry, which everybody should read because we're all medical missionaries, whether you like it or not. Counsels on Diets and Food is a very good book as well. And then there's Proof Positive by Neil Medley. That's a very good book that you can read, which goes into what we call non-communicable diseases like heart disease and high blood pressure and depression. And Neil does a lot of stuff actually about depression recovery. So there's some really good books that you can use, you can read yourself, can help with helping other people, even yourself. It has some good recipes, things to avoid, things to do, exercise programs, how to reduce your stress. So, I thought... Yes, I forgot.
Two questions.
Yeah.
This B17, I saw a program on it and I thought it was an illusion.
An
illusion.
Mm.
But I'm just wanting to know, I mean, how do you get it now? And the benefits of it now? And if you could just answer that first, because I've got another question.
I really wouldn't know how to get it now. I would presume you'd have to go on the internet. My brother probably might be able to help you a bit more about how to get it, but it was used to be isolated as a concentrate, and as he said, apricot kernels were the best, as it were. You can get it from apple seeds. It's the cyanide that's in the seed that is what's used to treat, as it were, it causes apoptosis or destruction of the cancer cells. That's the mechanism of it.
Yeah.
but it's not because there's no kind of regulated how much concentration and stuff like that. I think that's why it's kind of frowned upon.
Yeah. How long does, I mean, I've heard many theories about vitamin D, and you get these tablets. I mean, I take some, it's mainly vegan ones, yeah. But we had sunshine this week, 40 degrees. I'm not sure if that was correct, or probably 41, I'm not sure. I didn't feel it, but anyway, that's another story. How long do you have to be in the sun to get an adequate amount of vitamin D, and how long does that stay in your body for?
It depends on your skin type, because some people will burn much quicker than yourself. So if I was what we call Celtic type skin, so I've got dark hair but blue eyes, so you've still got fair features, you may burn very easy. So for me to say to you, go in the sun for an hour, it might actually be causing you more harm, for example in the midday sun. So it depends on what we call your skin type. Some people are more prone to burning than others, so how long it is depends on how much you're going to burn, first of all. And you may say to somebody with a fair skin type that the best thing for you to do is to get your sun before 11 o'clock and just at least 20 minutes. So what you need is the skin needs to warm up first, and then that process starts to happen. So you need to have your skin warm. So I would say you should be 20 minutes. But depending on your skin type, 20 minutes may be sufficient, and that's it, because any more than that without a sunblock may be quite dangerous for you. So I can't give you a definitive thing. I would say depending on your skin type and how prone you are to burning, you may benefit from wearing a low factor cream, maybe a factor 15 or factor 30, and being in the sun. I will burn in the sun. I have to wear factor 30. I can't stay in the sun too much myself, even though I'm black, half black. So that depends. How long does vitamin D stay in the system? We know that if I was to take a blood test for you today, that would be a representation of your vitamin D or your vitamin D levels 3 months ago. So if I was to take your vitamin D level in October, it will probably be quite high because of the sun that you may or may not have been exposed to during the summer. But if I take your vitamin D, say in March, which 3 months before that would have been December, your vitamin D levels may be very low. So if I see somebody who's got a vitamin D level that's kind of borderline, I wouldn't necessarily supplement them, because I would expect that in 3 months' time that they'll actually be quite high because of the exposure to the sun. So we know that it's a 3-month lag. We do know that from the blood results that you have. So I typically expect patients who have their blood test from about November, probably about December to May, to have a lower vitamin D blood level because of the winter months. But then to prepare them for that, from about October, I would say to my patients, you obviously don't get enough during the winter. We live in England, so you need to supplement from October to March. So that makes sense. So we've got here reducing our risk of cancer. What is cancer? It's a term applied to abnormal cells that have uncontrolled growth. So we're always throwing off cancers. And this is something I always say to you. Young people are always throwing off cancers. Middle-aged people, old people, we're throwing off cancers. But you know what? We have such an amazing body, an immune system, that our immune system says, no, I'm going to sort you out, and it just stops that cell growth, kills it dead. And our immune system continues to do that. What happens with cancer is maybe because we get older and our immune systems are not as efficient as we get increasing in years, or maybe because we've done something like smoking and that's altered our immune system or suppressed it, or alcohol, we've suppressed it, our body's ability to deal with these abnormal cells that our body's constantly throwing off is reduced, and therefore the cancer has an advantage over the immune system. So cancer is really an immune disease when you think about it. If you have a good immune system, you can try and mop up some of these cancers. Of course, if the cancer is very out of control, then that's the situation. But cancer is uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells. And it's basically the inability of the immune system to actually get on top of that so that the cancer embeds itself, gets its own blood supply, and then breaks off and spreads around the body. So, I have some true and false questions, and then what I thought I'd do is I'd kind of do a family fortune style quiz and see if we can get some of these answers correct. So, first question.
Dr. Alita?
Yes.
There you go then. You know, you just said cancer was... Just your definition of cancer, you said abnormal growth of abnormal cells.
Yeah.
So I thought it was abnormal growth of normal cells.
If it's a normal cell, then, because cancer cells are different because they develop their own blood supply, they congregate, they break off, that's not normal. Like if I had a breast cancer lump, if I have a breast tissue, my breast tissue is not going to go anywhere else in the body, my breast tissue is going to stay in my breast. But a breast cancer lump will eventually break off and go to my lymph nodes, and it will break off and go to my liver or wherever it is, so it's an abnormal growth.
So the abnormal growth bit I get.
Yeah, and it's an abnormal cell because they have more what we call mitosis, so they grow faster, it requires more nutrition, so that therefore starves the other cells in the body of everything because it requires more, so it's not a normal cell.
So being an abnormal cell, how does that abnormality occur? Because in my thinking of a normal cell, then you have some precursor that stimulates that normal cell to grow abnormally, and then
that becomes abnormal. So it's a normal cell that becomes abnormal, and then if that makes sense, but that abnormality will break off and then spread around the body. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So true or false? Women are more affected by cancer than men. False? Which? Okay, I'm going to put show of hands. True? Raise your hand. Did somebody say I don't know? False? Oh. Okay, some of you are like sitting on the sidelines. You've got to commit. You've got to commit. Choose. So you're saying true. You're saying false. Okay, false. Men are more affected by cancer in the UK. These are the UK statistics. Okay. True or false? Over 50% of patients will require surgery to remove their tumour. True or false? Okay, hands up for true. Okay. Hands up for false. Okay, those who say false, why don't you think it's more than 50, just over 50%?
I think if it's treated in other means.
Other means? If it's caught early. Okay. So it is false, only 44.8%, it's only very slightly false though, only 44.8% of people will need surgery. And only 26% will require radiotherapy, and I think 27% will require chemotherapy. So when you think about the treatments for cancer, they're not a lot of people will have what we call conventional treatments in terms of radiotherapy, chemotherapy or surgery. As there's now hormonal treatments, as my brother's alluded to, and there are also other things that you can try and do, but for some cancers, unfortunately it's so far advanced that you're going to be having palliative treatment, which means that you're not having any invasive treatments. And these statistics are taken from cancer research, if anybody wants to look at it. True or false? Cancer loves sugar.
True.
Very true. Very true. In fact, sugar is I feel one of the main causes of cancer, and we have so much sugar and hidden sugar in our body. And the reason why I say that is because sugar causes immune depression. So for I can't remember how many grams it is now, but for so much sugar, you depress your white cells for a certain period of time. So if you're constantly grazing through the day having sugar, your white cells, which are your immune cells, are not working as effectively. And as I said, we're always throwing off these cells. your immune system can't really work until you're sleeping, and some of us, we eat late at night, some of us get up in the night and eat some more. So you can imagine the problems that that you will be building up for yourself. So I have some statistics from Cancer UK. You cannot use your phones, so put your phones away, no cheating here. We're in the house of God. And we're going to look at statistics, and the questions I'm going to ask you is, I'm going to start with this side. I'm going to ask you, according to cancer research in 2016 to 2018, what are the top 10 cancers that affect men? And I'm going to kind of go around, and you've got 3 lives, and if you lose your 3 lives, the other team has a chance to steal. Okay, so no, we're going to do this we're going to do this in an orderly fashion. We're going to start with pasta, and we're going to move the microphone to the end. And if you lose your 3 lives, there's no prizes, by the way, people. There's no car. We'll do that. Okay, pasta, start us off.
I would say bowel cancer.
Bowel cancer. Yes, that's correct. That's on there. Number 3. Okay, next one.
I would say prostate.
Prostate. Yes, prostate is our top answer. Woo, woo, woo. Okay. Bladder cancer. It's number 8. Okay, next one. Lung cancer. Yes, that is our second answer. Come on, you've got to give it to somebody.
Breast cancer.
Breast cancer. I can't do it. We're looking at men. Yeah, men. Breast cancer affects 1% of men. It's not in the top 10. Yes. No, you can't pass it on. You must answer now. Choose one. Choose an organ. I think we've said bowel cancer. So try another one. Pancreatic. That's not the top 10. You've got 1 life left. You've got a chance to steal. Liver cancer. No. No, sorry. Right, have you guys had a chance to confirm?
I don't know.
It's over. It's over for this team. It's over. Let's see. Right.
So sorry.
So the other side. Let's get the microphone to the other side. Oh.
Testicular cancer?
No. No, it's not. No, it's not in the top 10. Although testicular cancer is, it's not in the top 10 of the cancer research, which affects men. Okay. Sorry, you've lost. You both lost. There's no car here. So we're going to go from number 10. Number 10. There are obviously all the ones that you've said, but they're not the commonest ones. Okay. So number 10 is brain tumours. Okay. Number 9 is esophagus, which is your food pipe. Okay. Number 8 is bladder. Number 7 is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a disease of lymph nodes. Number 6 is melanoma, okay, which is a type of aggressive skin cancer. 5 is kidney cancer. Number 4 is just grouped as head and neck, so any salivary gland tumours, mouth tumours, nose tumours, head and neck. Number 3 is bowel, number 2 is lung, and number 1 is prostate, which affects 52,000 men. Okay? Right, so Team B. Stats for women. According to the Cancer Research UK things, let's see what was named as the top 10 cancers. Where's the microphone? All right, we'll start with you, my brother. What are the top 10 cancers for women in the UK?
Ovary.
Ovary. Ovaries number 6. Okay, pass the mic along.
Breast cancer.
Breast cancer, yep, top answer there. Fantastic.
Cervical.
Cervical cancer.
Would it be leukemia?
Leukemia. There's 2 lives lost. This is on the cancer. It's not me. I'm not making this up. I'm taking it from the website yesterday. You've got 1 life left. You can't confirm. It's, what did you say? Bone or bowel? Bone. Okay, let's pass it over to the other side. Have you had a chance to confirm?
Liver cancer.
Liver cancer. Liver cancer is actually very rare as a primary cancer. Usually you have liver as a secondary cancer. So,
Ovarian cancer.
we've already had that. So, yes, we have bowel cancers, number 3, but you'd already given your first answer. So there you go. So let's go from number 10. Number 10 is kidney cancer.
Skin cancer for women.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're going to go through them. So number 10 is kidney cancer. Number 9 is pancreatic cancer. Number 8 is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Number 7 is brain intracranial diseases. 6 is ovarian. 5 is melanoma skin cancer. 4 is uterine cancer. I know we talked about cervical, but this is uterus and uterine cancers. 3 is bowel cancer, 2 is lung cancer, and number 1 is breast cancer at the rate of 55,545 women were diagnosed with breast cancer. Okay, so this is for everyone. A bit more. I'm going to ask you to name the top 14, actually the top 15, I couldn't fit the 15th on here, the top 15 cancers that affect people in the UK. So who's the microphone?
Anybody can answer.
Anybody can answer.
Lung cancer.
Lung cancer. Is lung cancer?
Yep. Has to be.
Nope.
It's an effect.
Lung cancer is there, sorry, yeah, lung cancer is there. It's number 2, I believe. Bowel cancer, yes, that is number 3.
Liver cancer.
Breast, that is number 1. Prostate, yes. I think prostate is number 2 actually. I think breast is number 1, prostate is number 2, lung is number 3, bowel is number 4.
Melanoma.
Melanoma, yep.
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Melanoma skin cancer is number 5, keeps me busy. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, yes, that is number 6. Bladder, no. Pancreas, I believe, is there, but I want you to find out what number 7 is, because I've got it on a very funny slide.
Esophageal cancer.
Esophageal cancer. Well, I have number 7 is kidney. So it's quite prolific, actually, kidney cancer. Number 8 is a region, so it's a bit difficult. I've said it before. Affects men, head and neck, that's right. Any more? Brain, yeah, brain cancers. We've said this one, pancreas and bladder. Any more? Now we're getting into the ones that we didn't talk about.
Bone cancer.
No, not bone cancer. I can't call it bone cancer.
Bone marrow.
Sorry, I heard somebody say it.
Bone marrow.
Leukemia, yes, leukemia.
Oh, so that's the same thing.
Leukemia is abnormality of blood cells which come from the bone marrow.
Right, because when they say it, they usually, it's quite interesting you said that. It's quite a new phenomenon for me, because usually people say bone cancer, but they never say
So there's bone cancer, which is the hard tissue.
Okay.
So you can get bone cancers where the hard tissue, the calcium part, the outer part, grows lumps, and they can be sarcomas,
Okay.
for example. So that's a different type of thing. And then you've got bone marrow,
Okay.
and if there's a problem with the blood cells, that's leukemia. And that's why they sometimes need to have a bone marrow transplant. Okay? So number 13. I don't believe no superstition. Number 13. It's a female one.
Uterine?
Uterine, that's right. Number 14. I think esophagus. And then number 15 is they have a category called all other cancers, and these are like things like your bone cancers, sarcomas, very, very rare tumours, but actually when you put them all together, that would be the 15th most common cancers in the UK. Okay, I'd say give yourself a round of applause because you drew. Do you want to say something?
Are there any organs of the body that cancer does not affect, like the heart?
You can get, it's very rare for you to get a cancer in the heart, but you can get a tumour of the heart. But it's very, 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 very rare. And yeah, can you get stomach cancer? These things are extremely rare. I'm just thinking of any other organs.
Soft tissue organs, isn't it? Soft tissue organs seems retarded.
But you can also get hard tissue, such as bones.
Yes.
I suppose the only place you can't get cancer, hard tissue, is the teeth. You don't get a cancer of the teeth. You may get some of the gums,
yes,
but not of the actual teeth.
Yeah. But isn't it strange that the heart is an organ? It's a pump, and it's working all the time. And the 4 chambers, and would you not think there's a reason that the heart doesn't get it as much as the other organs do?
The only reason
studies been done?
No, I don't know, but the only reason why I can think that the heart wouldn't is because it's got the best blood. The best blood that's been oxygenated from the lungs goes straight to the heart first before it goes to anywhere else in the body. So if you're having the best oxygenated blood and also getting rid of all the waste products, your immune system there, the white cells and stuff, because they're all going to be oxygenated. Cancers don't like oxygen, for example. I don't think it's a good environment for cancer to thrive. So it's not to say that you might not throw off cancers around there, but it's just not a hospitable environment, is what I would presume, but I haven't seen any studies myself.
Some years ago they sent cancer cells into space, and they found that when they were in space, they could not multiply. So there's strange things that are happening. We're not told everything. There's a lady, a black lady, called Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you've heard of her.
Yeah.
I read a book of Owen, and there's very strange things that have happened to this lady.
Yeah.
And if you go into the history of all of this, it's not that straightforward. But with myself, because I take the vitamin B17, I had a whole tub, that's lasted 3 years. I can't get any more. If it doesn't work, why have the cancer industry suppressed it?
If B17 doesn't work.
It's quackery
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. Why have they suppressed it?
Well, this is what was you unfortunately missed this morning. But we talked about the conspiracy of health and what's happening. Not everything that's being given is necessarily the best for us, but we are told it is. And people genuinely believe it will be, but it's not necessarily the best. But as you said, if it doesn't work, what's the problem? But there is a conspiracy. Right, so what we were going to do is, because this, we could talk about all of these cancers, and each one of themselves is a massive topic of its own, but we thought that we would focus on the most common ones that affect women and also the ones that affect men. So Simon's going to talk about prostate cancer, because that's the most common cancer for men, and I was going to talk about breast cancer, which is the most common cancer, in fact, in the UK for women. So do you want to start first, or should I do the breast cancer one?
Ladies first.
Ladies first. So what is breast cancer? So it's an abnormally uncontrolled growth of breast tissue cells. Okay, so it affects the breast. And it's the most common cancer in women, and it affects a lifetime risk, now we say in the UK, of 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And it's the second most common cancer, I put here, second most common cancer in women, leading cancer-related deaths, and that's because you can get metastasis from other diseases, but it is the most common one. So I'm just going to go through this. So what I want to make you aware of is that most breast cancers, if not nearly all of them, are hormone-driven cancers. So there's specific cancers that women have, estrogen and progesterone. There's another one called HER2. But these are predominantly a hormone-driven cancer. And the hormone that is driving this state for your body to produce or not be able to cope with these abnormal cells is the hormone estrogen. Okay? So 70% of breast cancers express hormone receptors for estrogen or progesterone. Okay? And there are some other types of receptors, as it were. So you may hear of something called a HER2 receptor. And then you have the less common cancer, which is what we call triple negative, which means that there's no receptors for HER2, estrogen or progesterone receptors. And those ones are found to be a bit more tricky to treat, and actually more common in the black community, the triple negative tumours. And it's found to be more difficult to treat from a kind of medical point of view, because for most cancers, what the treatments are is that you'll have an excision, depending on where it is. You might have a wide local excision. You might have something called a sentinel node biopsy, where they inject a dye into the area and try to see where that drains to in the lymph node, and they take that one draining lymph node away and see if there's any cancer there. And then you may be offered a course of either radiotherapy, or depending on the hormone that's driving it, you may be offered a course of hormone therapies, which have their own complications in of themselves, but to try and block these receptors. We talked about genetics. So if you'll find if you go to see, if you find a lump in your breast and you see your GP and they refer you, then they will ask you some questions about what we call a family history. So that's to determine whether you need to have genetic counselling, whether this is a cancer that runs in your family, and whether any other female members and male members also need to be tested, because men do get breast cancer. As I said, 1% of breast cancers will be affecting men, and men, although they may not be symptomatic with a breast cancer, if they've got BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutations, they can pass this down to their daughters as well. So people will be tested, okay? So what is BRCA, which is breast receptor mutation? So it's a mutation in what we call a gene. And these are mutations that inactivate cancer suppression genes. So as I said to you, if you look at all the different kind of metabolic pathways, what you'll see is that there's this pathway that will go to this, will go to that, and then there's these other things that suppress this, suppress that, suppress this. But if they're being knocked out, for whatever reason, maybe you might have a gene mutation, or something's happened, like maybe, for example, you smoked, then these suppressor genes don't work as well, and then the cancer's just basically got free rein to keep on growing. So apparently there's a 60 to 80% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer in this country. So as this is an estrogen, pro-estrogen state, we need to look at what is the things that are causing our bodies to be in a pro-estrogen state. So there's lots of medications, as it were. So if you have taken the oral contraceptive pill, depending on what type, that does increase your risk of breast cancer. Also things like hormone replacement therapy. So if you are suffering with menopause and you decide to go on to hormone replacement therapy, the GP will do an assessment of you to make sure that this is suitable for you, and will only put you on the hormone replacement therapy for a certain period of time, because they don't want to increase. By treating your menopause, they're going to cause a different problem. So hormone replacement therapies can cause these problems. Okay? Pesticides. So there's obviously an increase of pesticides as science has become more clever. These pesticides, or these organophosphates, when they're converted in the foods that we eat and everything like that, they can then be not transferred, but they can affect the hormones and drive a pro-estrogen state. So organic is best if you can do it. Animal and dairy, not because the animals per se are bad animals, but again, what is being fed to these animals. As we know, I think I was talking to somebody who was a farmer who said, before, when you used to have a chicken, it would take so many weeks for them to grow into a full kind of like chick. But now, because of the feeds that they're giving these animals will mature really, really quickly. It's the same for the food. I was speaking to some Jamaican young man who used to grow pineapples back home, and he's saying that because of what they're putting on it, they can get a fully formed pineapple. I can't remember what time, but it's crazy. Like he's saying, it's absolutely crazy. So in order to make money, there's the conspiracy. These things will be used to try and improve productivity, to ensure that you get more bang for your buck, as it were. But these are having a detrimental effect on our health. So you see that I used to have a joke that when I would drive through West London, nearly every shop was a chicken shop. I was like, how many chickens are being slaughtered each day to fund these shops? Because these shops are busy. They're not going out of business. Chicken shops seems to be a new one all the time. But obviously, you can imagine how many chickens that's just in that part of London, while that's the rest of the UK. I don't know how many chickens are slaughtered each day, but that's a lot of chickens, and that requires a lot of productivity and little loss. So all of these things are being used, and they are having an adverse effect. So animal and dairy can cause this pro-estrogen state. And also obesity increases this risk of a pro-estrogen state. So estrogen is a fat hormone. So if you're obese, being obese in general increases your risk of cancers. And it's this whole thing about, again, if you are carrying excess weight, your body's having to divert attention and help and resources to get you to move whatever it is, maybe. And these are basically tiring the body from being repaired elsewhere. So you're kind of diverting the immune system from doing what it needs to do. So obesity is not good. So it's always encouraged that people try and get to an ideal body weight. So a lot of people ask me, what about soya? Isn't soya giving men man boobs and things like that? So soy foods are not supplements, they're foods, and they are weak plant estrogens. So they do contain estrogen, but it's actually been shown, especially some Chinese studies where in China and Japan they eat quite a lot of soy. It's actually shown to have a protective effect against breast cancer. So the estrogens that we're experiencing are estrogens from more of an animal or dietary problems which are causing this pro-estrogen state, rather than from weak plant sterol. So estrogen exposure. Our estrogen exposure will increase over our lifetime, and it's linked to an onset of breast cancer. So some things like you may be asked is, when did you start your periods? So if you've started your periods, and children are starting their periods now. I have a friend who's a school teacher, they're starting them at 8 and 7. Like when I was in medical school, if you started your period at 9, that was called precocious puberty. I have seen a child who started their periods at 5, and I've treated, so our children are starting their periods much earlier. And I believe this is linked to the diet that we are giving our children. So if you imagine that you are starting now that cycle every month now with your estrogen being released and eggs released, and that's causing you to have a bleed each month, and you're starting that at a much earlier stage in your life, instead of the average being about 14, as it were 20, 30 years ago, it's not the case. So if you're doing that, even those couple of years of having 12 cycles a year, that's 12 cycles of estrogen that's being released. So that increases your risk. So if you have an early onset of what we call menarche, or starting in periods, late menopause, and it's the same thing. So if you start early and you finish late, that's a lot of estrogen that your body's been exposed to. Okay? And then not having any children. So when pregnancy is a protective factor, because you are not having a period. So, you know, for 9 months that's not happening. So, but if you've never had children, that also increases your risk, as it were, of this pro-estrogen exposure, which can potentially increase your risk for breast cancer. And then I talked also about hormonal therapies as well. So what increases your risk? So alcohol. We know, well, in the 90s there was this ladette culture behaviour. I don't know if you remember it, in the 90s, where girls were like, we're just as tough as boys, we can drink beer, we can drink lager, we can hang out, and all the rest of it. And ladies were no longer ladies but ladettes. And now that happened all in the 90s, I remember this growing up. And now we're seeing the consequences of this behaviour, not only in them but in that way. But more than one serving of alcohol a day will increase your risk. We've talked about estrogen-containing medications such as HRT, birth control pills, the oral, so the implants that people have. So in women receiving postmenopausal HRT, the breast cancer risk of the HER2 or hormone receptor positive cancers, HER2 new positive tumours will increase. Okay, that's a specific receptor. In women taking estrogen progesterone replacement for more than 15 years, the risk of breast cancer increased by 83% compared to just estrogen-only HRT. So the type of HRT you take is important if you're going to go down that road, and how long you take it as well will determine your risk of developing subsequent not only cancers of the breast but also uterine cancers. Okay. So, as I said, it increased by 83% if you're taking estrogen progesterone replacement therapy for more than 15 years. We don't advocate that. And estrogen-only HRT increases by 19%. A low intake of fruit and vegetables also increases your risk of breast cancer. The correct mechanism has not been identified, but I would presume this is just due to just a general cleaning out of your system. It's really important to have fruits and vegetables. Not only do they provide the necessary vitamins and minerals, which are needed in so many metabolic pathways. You would be amazed. I have a slide with all the different metabolic pathways, and it just looks like somebody scribbled because there's just so many different pathways. But there's so many different minerals, trace minerals like selenium, zinc, magnesium, even maybe the vitamin B17. These all play an important factor in how your body works efficiently. If you're driving a car and you continue to drive it and you don't check your oil, for example, eventually that engine's going to give up. So you have to keep on topping up the oil and checking it. And it's like the same thing with your brake fluid. So there's lots of different mechanisms in a car that when the mechanic checks it over, make sure it's fine, like the ball bearings are fine in the car, wheel, etc., etc. And we have so many little biochemicals that we find in our fruits and vegetables that we probably don't even have a clue about as scientists, which all help to provide health basically. A lot of studies are now being done about gut health and the microbiome, and about if you have a very similar diet, how you're not improving your microbiome in your gut, and that can predispose you to certain cancers. And I believe that the reason why we've been given this varied diet of seeds, fruits, nuts, vegetables, is so that you can have all of those little trace elements. You don't need a lot, probably don't even need to supplement, just eat properly, just to help regulate our bodies. Also with problems with not being able to go to the toilet as regularly as you want, and constipation. If you are not going to the toilet at least once a day, you're holding your waste in your body for ages, and your body then reabsorbs that water and reabsorbs things. And the first evidence that something's going wrong with your bowel is your face or your skin, because it starts to break out. So I believe this is the reason why, this is my theory now, that fruits and vegetables are very important with reducing that. We've identified that low intake of fruit and vegetables is associated with breast cancer, but it's not been explained why. And the same thing goes with obesity. We know that with obesity, it's associated with other diseases, and it's not just breast cancer that being overweight is associated with, it's also associated with other types of cancers. Exposure to radiation. This is quite an interesting one. What used to happen back in the day is that ladies would have breast cancers removed and then they get treated with this high dose of X-ray therapy called radiotherapy. And it was not specific, it's much more nuanced now, but they would just blast the whole chest wall with it. And then what would happen is that possibly 20 years later people would come back with recurrence, as it were, and it's very difficult to treat when that happens. So exposure to different types of radiation can also increase your risk. It's not such a common thing anymore. It was probably about 10 years or so before when I was training. A sedentary lifestyle, so this is linked to exercise. If you don't exercise, you're not getting rid of waste, you're not getting blood flowing around the body, you're not improving your immune system. If you're just sitting down, watching TV, not doing much, and it doesn't even have to be like the couch potato sits down with a remote and doesn't do anything, just not exercising because you're so busy. And I put myself in that category. It does not help with your immune system. So age, 80% of women with breast cancer are over 50, but what I'm realising is that more and more women, it's becoming younger and younger. I remember at medical school, it was like, most women over 50, and that's why the screening focuses on, the breast cancer screening will focus on that. But we are seeing more and more women who probably have a genetic history, and they've been called in and they're having these what we call risk-reducing mastectomies. More women in their 30s, early 40s, with young families who are getting it and having really aggressive cancers as well at this age. Very difficult sometimes to treat and passing away from it. But age in general is associated with an increase of breast cancer. I've talked about genetics, so there's three main ones, BRCA1, BRCA2 and P53 gene. P53 is also related to some types of skin cancers. So I'm just going to talk about self-examination. So even if you're a man, it's good to know if you've got a wife, you can examine too. Okay, so if you don't have a wife, don't. But and also for men as well, because men can get breast cancer, so it's important that you self-examine. And you can see this like Wonder Woman kind of cartoon. She's kind of showing what you need to do. So I'm just going to explain to you what this breast cancer and the lymph nodes are, because what the first signs that most women will have is that they will feel a lump in their breast, or they may have some nipple discharge, or they may find that the nipple is gone in, what we call an inverted nipple. And then you can see here that they've got lymph node chains which are in the centre of the chest. They go all the way up to the axilla, is the posh word for armpits. And then you've got lymph nodes in the armpits that come here, a few down here. So it's important that when you're examining your breast that you examine for all of these things, because sometimes with some patients the first thing they feel actually is a lump in their armpit, because actually the cancer is so far behind the breast tissue you couldn't, even if you wanted to, you wouldn't be able to feel that lump. So it's important that you also look in the armpit. So what you need to do is look for nipple discharge, look for any swelling. So you need to look in a mirror, look for any swellings in the armpit. So put your arms up to see if there's any swellings there, and any swellings in the collarbone where some of the lymph nodes are as well. Does it look different to the other side? If you're looking for nipple discharge, you can sometimes squeeze the nipple and see if any kind of bloody fluid comes out. Green fluid is not too bad. It's not a great thing to have green fluid coming out of your breast, by the way, but it can be, that can just be related to a cyst, but it's worth getting it checked out. But obviously it's quite alarming. The other thing you need to look for is any rash or crusting on the breast. There's a disease called Paget's disease, which is linked to breast cancer, so that comes out as a rash. Or as my friend had, it was just red and swollen, an inflammatory reaction. The other thing that you may see when you're looking at your breast is whether the nipple's going in. And that may represent that there's a cancer right behind the nipple and it's pulling that nipple in as it's growing. Okay, so you need to look at the nipple, make sure, do both my nipples look okay? Fine. And then you may see like this dimpling or a lump, or the texture feels different, or this puckering. A very late sign is something called peau d'orange, which means that your skin looks like orange peel skin, and that's because it's all swollen because of the cancers affecting the lymphatics. That's quite a late sign, but that's something to look for. And then what you need to start doing is feeling. So you're going to be feeling, getting your hand to top and hand to the bottom, and you're going to use the flat of your hand and you're going to rub across where your collarbone is. And then you're going to be holding, depending how big your breasts are, you might have to lift them up, depending on it is. And you just lift, I'm being real, right? Okay? And you have to, if you've got, because you've been breastfeeding, for example, then you feel it in between the flat of your hands first, feel around the nipple, and then feel the flat of your hand here, and then you start to use your fingertips and feel a bit more. And try going in a circular motion so that you kind of go like this or like this in a circular one, and do that once a month. And best time to do it if you are menstruating is the week after your period, because just before your cycle you may find that your breasts may swell, for example, and you may not get a good picture, so that's the best time to do that. But you want to be feeling for any lumps or any thickening. If you do feel any lumps, please don't put it off, please see your GP so that you can be referred as soon as possible. The other thing I forgot to mention, it might be a bit later in my presentation, is that breastfeeding is quite protective for breast cancer, because when you're breastfeeding you suppress your estrogen, you're releasing this hormone called prolactin, and that reduces your pro-estrogen state. So I know it's not fashionable for some people to breastfeed, but it is protective, it is what God intended. So we have a national screening programme which is available for women who are over the age of 50 up to the age of 71, and so you may be called for that. And if you did find a lump in your breast, these are some of the questions that your doctor will ask you, and this is why they're asking you as well, because you may be thinking, why is this doctor asking me so many questions? And just take the lump out, for example. But there's a reason why, because it just helps to plan for different things. So they might ask you, when did you find this lump? A lot of people find lumps ages ago. And the most saddest thing that I hear is that they found this lump, but they're caring for their husband. Their husband wasn't well, or something happened with their children, and they're too busy looking after them, for example, and then maybe the partner passes away, and then they're like, oh, I need to focus on myself. And then they go to the GP, but they've had it for like 6 months already, or a year. So it's important for us to know when this lump was found, because then we'll have an idea of how long this has been progressing. How did you find it? Was it you that found it? Was it your husband? How did this happen? Was it that your bra was uncomfortable? Any associated pain, nipple changes or discharge. They'll take something called a family history, so we'll go through the whole family, mum, dad, siblings, mum's siblings, dad's siblings, grandparents. We want to know whether anybody else has had breast cancer, and this will help determine your risk as well. They'll ask you when your period started, have you started the menopause, how many pregnancies have you had? Again, it's talking about this breaking up of the estrogen cycle. Did you breastfeed? Have you used oral contraceptive pills, hormone replacement therapies, or like hormone contraceptive pills? In the NHS, you will see your GP. They'll refer you on what we call a 2-week wait, so you'll be seen within 14 days by a specialist, and something we call a one-stop clinic. So basically, you will see the doctor or the nurse consultant. They will ask you these questions. They'll examine you. They'll send you for investigations, and depending on your age, you may have an ultrasound scan, which is like the scan that you have if you're pregnant, or you may have a mammogram. And then they'll try and do a biopsy on the same day as well. And then usually they come back to the clinic. These results are discussed in what we call a multidisciplinary team meeting. it's all decided as to what would be the best course of treatment, and then you're asked to come back, usually possibly the following week, even a bit sooner sometimes, for the results. And there's different types of breast cancers, which I'm going to not go through too much because I want to give Simon the time, but we will offer either surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy. Sometimes we offer chemotherapy before you have the surgery, because if it's too big for surgery, you might need to shrink it down. And then something called adjuvant treatments, which involve hormone replacement therapy, not hormone replacement therapies, hormone blocking therapies. And then there's lots of different types of surgery. One of the questions that a lot of, I get asked about a lot of Adventists is, should I have surgery? Should I just go on to having herbs and stuff like that? And I always say this, you don't know how long that cancer's been there before you found it. Because just because you found it, it could have been there for a long, long time. With everything, every disease, it takes a long time for your body to have got to this state, because your body would have been doing everything it can to get rid of it in the first place. And if you want, I'm not saying that herbs and things don't have their place or benefits, but what I will say is that the Bible says that if your right hand offends you, cut it off, and if your right eye offends you, pluck it out. And I will say that if you want to go down this alternative route, then why not give your body the chance to be able to do this by removing the root cause of it. If you choose not to have any adjuvant therapies and to go down the herbal route, that is fine, but I would recommend that you have surgery at least to remove the root cause and then let your body deal with the little bit. Why let your body climb a mountain when you can just give it a little hill? Wow. That's my recommendation for you. So, as I said, there's lots of adjuvant therapies. So, protections, prolonged breastfeeding. It depends, because you know children have teeth.
Doctor,
yes.
You know the point you made, I mean, Ellen White makes the point that you shouldn't just say God will heal me.
No, yeah, exactly.
There's a process of healing that. And because you're taking the surgery, because many Adventists say, oh, the Lord will heal me, I don't need to go to that. I think that's a bit naive.
Yeah, I think it's naive, and although some people may be sceptical of modern medicine, you know, God has given people wisdom in how to do things. And it's amazing how, I would say, surgery has progressed, where like before people just taking off whole breasts back in the day, and now you can literally define it to a certain place. You could even put a wire in the cancer and just take that bit out, and it's not as mutilating as it used to be. Surgery has advanced so much, and there's different things that can be done to restore function. It's one of my roles, to restore function and also treat the cancer. And for some people, once they've had surgery, they may not even need any of the adjuvant therapies, as it were, and you can go and take your vitamin B17 or any of these, high dose vitamin D, etc., etc. You can do that and change your lifestyle. Try and change the root of what caused it. You can do that, but don't discount surgery. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a surgeon. I'm saying it because I've seen a lot of people not have surgery, and I've told them to have surgery, and then it gets worse, and then surgery is very difficult. Okay, and then they still do the things, and then some of them have unfortunately passed away. So don't be naive about it. Talk things through with your surgeon. Talk through with a medical practitioner who believes in the health message, and get some counsel, and obviously pray about it. So breastfeeding, prolonged breastfeeding reduces your estrogen exposure. There was a study in Sri Lanka that said that women who breastfed for 2 years helped reduce their breast cancer risk. Just think that, not smoking, being the right weight, exercise, healthy diets, all of these 4 lifestyle factors in combination reduce the risk of breast cancer by 36%. And the median survival for metastatic cancer, which is cancer that's spread from the original point of origin, as it were, increases to 38 months compared to 12 months. And then exercise for muscle strength, improves muscle strength, improves your immunity, helps your mood. And this is really important after you've had surgery. Exercise, because surgery, sometimes depending on what you have, even if you decide to go down chemotherapy, radiotherapy, these are very oppressive, tiring treatments, and exercise, if you can do it, is really important. I do have more about this, but I'm mindful that Simon needs to talk about prostate. We need to talk about the men. But I'm happy to talk to anybody about it specifically, but we just talked about high fibre diets, alcohol, limiting your sugar, limiting saturated fats and hydrogenated fats, and using things like omega-3, which is increasing walnuts, cruciferous vegetables, which are things like cabbage, broccoli, kale, flaxseed, fish oils. These are things that you can do to try and help improve your immune system. All of these things really are immune modulators. We're improving the immune system. None of these things in and of itself has some super magical powers. These are things that work together with your body to improve the immune system. Does anybody have any questions at the moment about that? It's pretty self-explanatory.
Can I ask a question? You know, I've heard of individuals who said that all of a sudden stage 4 cancer, and they've gone to the hospital, gone to the doctors. Doctors said, you know, it's some indigestion or whatever they say, and the person is just about at death's door now. How is that possible? I've never been clear about it. I don't know if you can, you know, tell me something on that.
So you're talking about somebody who...
Yeah, they've been going for treatment for an illness, and you know, all of a sudden, at the end of it, stage 4 cancer. But the doctor's been...
So for a different tumour, not cancer?
Well, they went for a treatment, and the doctor says nothing. There's nothing. There isn't anything. You know, you may have an indigestion, or you may just have some pain, or you know. I've heard of this many times, and then people say, "Well, it's stage 4 cancer now, so I'm on my last leg." How on earth could that be possible? I mean,
depends on what the original cancer is, and it depends on who the specialist is that you're seeing. So if you're seeing a heart specialist because you've got chest pain and you're saying it's indigestion, let's say you're saying it's indigestion and you end up seeing a heart specialist because they think maybe it's chest pain and they want to rule that out. For a heart specialist, everything they see is heart related. So it's sometimes about looking at the bigger picture. And one of my consultants used to say that if you have a hammer, everything you look at looks like a nail. And you have to look at the bigger picture. And sometimes, for some doctors, it's not criticism, but if that's their specialist field, then everything looks like a nail and may not be able to understand the nuances. I don't want to blame doctors, but sometimes we don't listen to our patients. Often they say the history or the diagnosis is in the history. So what the patient tells you, 80% of the time, you can know what it is from how the patient tells you. So it's a really important skill to actually ask the right questions to get down to the bottom of it. I sometimes liken my job to being like a police officer. I'm investigating a crime or disease, and I have to ask the right questions to get down to the bottom of it. And sometimes you have to ask very wide, varied questions to get to the bottom of it. We are pressured, there's time pressures, and sometimes that luxury of doing that, especially in the GP practice, is not available. So it may be that they're just not thinking of that, and that's why it's missed. And then something happens, a symptom happens, and they think, hang on a second, let me do something else, and then bang, there's cancer. And it's in a place where you don't want it to be, like in the lungs or in the liver, for example, which is usually stage 4. So that's what I would presume may be the reason why for it. It depends on how we present ourselves, and also we need to be honest with our doctors. Some of us are a bit shy. We don't want to talk about certain things, and it's very difficult for a doctor to diagnose you if you're hiding things. If you don't want to talk about stuff in front of your family, then kick your family out of the consultation room, because your doctor might ask you some very open questions. They might ask you, for example, about your lifestyle and who you've slept with, and you may not want your family to know this, or your partner, and all the rest of it, but that thing, explaining that to the doctor could save your life. So sometimes, yes, it's nice to have a family member with there, but sometimes you might need to kick them out so you can be open with your doctor to help your doctor help you. So that's important as well. So like I said, I think sometimes we may have tunnel vision if we're especially if we're super specialists. It's time. We may not be honest with them, and sometimes we just don't know how to describe our symptoms, or we say we've got chest pain, but it's actually bellyache. I've had that before, and it's a very common thing. Like if somebody's got pneumonia, sometimes they present with abdominal pain because that's where the pain's being sent, and that's how the brain is interpreting it. But actually, there's a problem with the lungs, and it's oftentimes if with surgical residents we say like if somebody's got abdominal pain and everything's fine, they might have a pneumonia. Do a chest X-ray. Sometimes they do. So it's just about thinking outside the box with that. I think my sister has a question.
I think you covered what I was going to say. Sometimes the symptoms are non-specific, and other times we don't articulate what the problem is well enough to give the doctor a clue that it could be something more sinister. Yeah,
sometimes like with Caribbean people, it's just wind. I just need to pass wind. and I say that because we have a just need to take some peppermint tea. And no, sometimes you just I just need it. As soon as I pass the wind, doctor, I'll be fine. No, sometimes it's not wind. Sometimes it is something a bit more serious. But we do try to trivialise it. Maybe it's fear. Some of us don't want to go to the doctors, whatever. But not everything is wind. But we do sometimes try to, in our simplicity, we try to condense everything down, and it's not necessarily that way. And it's just something simple like, oh, I found a bit of blood in my stool, but we might dismiss it, but the doctor's like, oh, right, okay, I need to do this investigation. So just because you might think it's insignificant, sometimes just a little thing could just turn everything on its head, oh, actually I need to think about something completely different to my specialty and refer to somebody else, for example. So be specific. Don't go on and on and on, or the doctor also, because that doesn't help with the time. But try to be as specific as you can and as open as you can. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I'm going to pass you on Simon.
I know you've been sat down for a while, so if you wouldn't mind, can we all just stand and just have a little stretch, please? Stretch however you can. We all stretch in many different ways. That's all right. We'll just stretch and just give our bodies a bit of a movement. And before we move on to our, I like it. We've got an active church here. Amen. Okay, so before you sit down, I think we should also exercise our voices as well. So if you don't mind, can we just sing one song? It is 286.
What's that?
Sing it over again to me? Yes.
286, okay.
Wonderful words of life, yes.
And before we do that, is anybody looking for a car key at all? It's a Ford. Well, everybody wants it. This is the car. Answering all the questions correctly. Okay, sing it over again to me. 286. See
Okay, good evening, church. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. It soon will be 6 o'clock and time has certainly flown by. But thank you for still being here. And thank you for listening so attentively. A few stories. 3 very, very quick stories before I start throwing it at the men. Not literally, but we'll move on to your topic. So, how does cancer affect us? And sometimes do we know that we have it? A later just reference to an occasion, and I can tell you we have a real life situation with a family member of ours who we went to see them and they just felt that they had the wind. And, they says, I just feel like I need to do something. And as we sat there with the children burst out laughing because these things can be funny. The time passed by. It was a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. She did mention that she'd been to the hospital and she was complaining about the wind that she had. She was adamant that she was eating the wrong type of food and she was getting bloated and so forth. But things can happen. And we found out, despite having gone to the hospital on more than one occasion for checkups for what this appeared to be severe pain was, we were given the sad news that she had terminal cancer, and from the first checkup it had spread so severely to an extreme stage 4, at which there's nothing else that could be done. So I ask that you please do pray for our family as we go through this time, because these things do happen. Second story. Can cancers be prevented and cured or even reduced? The simple answer to that is, irrespective of the official answer, is yes. How? Well, a dear gentleman who has joined us today has given us his experience, and I can tell you an experience of my own father who also went through a terrible stage of having prostate cancer. But you see, my father has a deep belief in the Word of God, and as a person who has studied medicine as well as herbal medicines and different various therapies, and has worked particularly within the chemical industry for most of his life, has a very, very deep and good understanding of the human body as well as how to look at ways to heal it. And over a period of time, he looked at what the options were, as well as what has been provided to him by us through God's creation. He is, if I want to use the correct words, the alternative words, his cancer went away. It took some time. It didn't just happen overnight. But he realized, considering the severity of where he was, that he had to make very stringent changes. He had to work through them. He had to realize where he had come from to where he was and where he needed to go. The third story, I think I might leave that for later. I notice you like to have little quizzes, and I like the interaction here, it's good. So I have a few questions for you. Okay? Now, everything that we've talked about before, just this afternoon, you're going to hear again. maybe in a slightly different form, because you'll realise there's a deep connection between our health issues, particularly cancers, and how we can reduce, prevent, or even make things better if it doesn't get to a stage where nothing can be done. But one question I ask, that I'm going to ask you, is this. Does anybody have an idea of when cancer was first documented? Now, I come from not just a medical but also a science background, particularly within profession. So I like to read a lot, I like to study a lot, and I like to go and hunt down where these things have happened. So, does anybody know? Come on. Do you think it was...
It just happened at the time of the pharaohs.
Yes, very, very close, the Egyptian times. BC 1500 BC. So, the report talks about... Oh boy, I've gone too fast. Where's my mouse? The report talks about there was a tumour found on the breast. And the cancer was treated by destroying the tissues with a hot instrument called the fire drill. Now that's really interesting. Because somebody else also mentioned certain types of instruments that could be used to kill off cancers. There is a very, very famous car of today owned by the richest man in the world, his company, related and named after this man. Who do you think it was?
Bill Gates.
No, not Bill Gates. He's not a car man. So he says. It wasn't Ford, no. Tesla. Yes. So Nikola Tesla also verified this, and he had done many studies himself. But as you know, people who seem to find very interesting reasons to find cures or even practices to reduce the impact of health, whether to improve it, and a big business sits behind it, will always end up in a little bit of trouble. Another question. Again, when do you think the first evidence of fossilized cancer was found? What time period? Dinosaurs.
Yes.
So that's very interesting, because there is a group called the Genesis Group. It's actually managed and run by the Adventist Church, or people who are from the Adventist community, and they have also made references to fossilized items from back in those times. However, from the official point of view, the first earliest evidence of a specific type of cancer found among fossilized bones and tumours from human mummies particularly were also found during the Egyptian times. How long has cancer been around then? A very, very, very long time, it appears. If we're looking back to 1500 BC and we are seeing evidence of this beforehand, it means the impact of sin has been going on from, well, controversial question now. Do we have the ability to create, manipulate and adopt cancers in modern day time? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
To what extent? Well, and I have seen this firsthand. It was reported back in 2010, where a collaboration of British universities were given the go-ahead to look particularly how we can manipulate, based upon the evidence before them, and create and also manipulate cancers to a very effective mean. Included universities such as Manchester, Cambridge University, fully funded by private organisations for this work. You may have heard over the past 3 years the names of companies like CRISPR and the Gates Foundation, Pfizer, and many others that are all involved within the business of what? You would say drugs, but I would call them diseases. Wow. Okay, another question. Somebody's already mentioned this. Can we place ourselves in right environments that will suck cancer growth, limit it, or even give us the opportunity to be cured? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Just a moment ago it was mentioned that they did a test, and you're right, it was back in 2017. It was the Grim experiment, and they tested some cancer cells in space, yet they didn't report this until 2 years later. Why? They knew so early, they had tested it over and over, it had been concluded 2 years in advance. The reports were suppressed. Why? Okay. Real life story here, so not a question. In my experience, having seen people come out of, more or less, get through being cured essentially from having prostate cancer, I was on a journey several years ago. We're going back to about 2014 to 16. I went on an expedition and I met a man in Nepal. We were on an expedition and he told me his story. He was living in China at the time and he became ill. In him becoming ill, he found out he had cancer. Now, he wasn't a Chinese born, he wasn't essentially from China, but he got a very good job and got into the lifestyle and kind of enjoyed life to the fullest, as you could say, within the remits of what you can in China. And what was interesting is that this young man, who was then, when I met him, in his 40s, actually came from a mountain village. And when he found out that he had cancer, he says, right, I'm going to have to make changes too. He remembered the practices of what happened in his home village. In the same way as the gentleman and the studies that happened where cancer can't survive in certain environments or can be suppressed, he went back to his home village, a high altitude mountain village near the Nepalese mountains. And he went upon a course in changing his lifestyle. Some time later, this same man had overcome his cancer. The cancer that he had would not survive in the high altitude mountain living lifestyle that he was in. And with a change in diet, a change in his mannerisms, his character and attitude, he was overcome it. He focused, his food came from the food that was grown in the area. He drank plenty of water. He did plenty of exercise. And he made sure he followed what his village people calls the principles of life. He wasn't Adventist, he wasn't a Christian, he came from a Buddhist background. But he understood what it meant by looking after your body, living off the fruit and the seeds and the plants of the land, and making sure he didn't do anything that would cause injury or harm to himself. Completely changed lifestyle, and after some time, he'd overcome that cancer. Okay. Who is in the business of, can you name me some companies that are in the business of cancer, particularly? And when I say cancer particularly, I'm going to say manufacturing. Can you name me some of the companies?
IG Farben.
Okay, yeah.
Chemical factory in Germany.
Yeah.
Pfizer.
Pfizer, any more?
I don't know.
To a degree, yes. Bristol Myers. I'm sure many of you have bought items from a company called Johnson & Johnson. I won't tell you the story about talcum powder. Can leave that for another time. Sofino, Roche, Celgene, Quib, AstraZeneca, Merck. These are all companies that you've all probably heard of. But this is interesting. Can anybody tell me what the cancer drug industry's revenues of sales, particularly when it comes to oncology drugs, is worth? Okay, so I've heard many different values, but yes, you can say billions. Billions and billions going into the trillions. Think of it 12 years ago, 2010. It was reported that it was worth 52.8 billion. That's in 2010. 2019, revenues of a specific company, I won't mention its name, was reported at $103.5 billion, 2019. So you can imagine what the industry in its entirety is worth. The market size for cancer therapeutics reported back in 2018 was registered at 180 million, and it's expected to go up tenfold in 2026. What I'm trying to say to you is that when there's money, and big money behind health, there's always a conspiracy. The official statement might be that there is no cure for cancers, but there are many reports going through history over years upon years where cancer has been treated and cured and suppressed. But those who run the business that control our governments will not allow you to both know and understand this. There are several books you can turn to. Some of them I'll name, written by Tyann Bollinger, Dr. Gustav Collingscher. There are several others, even people who have been silenced, like Julie Mitrovich, and even to the point where Nikola Tesla, they basically copped him off, essentially, irrespective of the stories you may hear, who give reports and indications of how we can have better health and how we can overcome such things as certain types of cancers. But in a world today where we know that God has given license to the devil to make things a lot worse, and the power to do whatever he can, it's going to become harder and harder. And we are going to have to watch meticulously what we need to do in order to remain healthy, stay healthy, and live by God's principles. Okay, so we all know what cancer is, okay? A few things I'm going to go through very quickly because we've been here for a very long time, so I might have to cut down what I was going to present. Okay? Women, you like to talk, don't you? It's true. No, it's true. Women like to talk, and they are more likely to share with others or with each other about personal circumstances, whatever it may be, whether it's health, and they're willing to be more open. Men, well, sometimes we need to open our mouths, isn't it? Well, especially when it comes to personal things, and if I was to, hear a person and they came to me, a man, and say he's got prostate cancer, he'd probably be a bit hesitant to speak about it. So men, we kind of have a problem, and it starts with us. We need to be more open with how we are. We need to talk. We need to look at things together, okay? And in good communication, we can also bring good results. So, what is it? What is cancer? How does it affect us? What is the prostate? What does your prostate do? Symptoms of prostate cancer: common risk, reducing risk, hospital treatments, nature, natural methods, the Bible, and our health. I have a lot of information here. We may not be able to get through it all, but I'll try and go as quickly as possible. So, I come from a background, as I said, similar to Alita, from a kind of clinical learning as well as going into the sciences, and furthermore I am more so in the business end of things, particularly over the past 13 years, well actually it's 15 years. So I see how businesses operate on a wide scale. I've seen how the European Commission, the EU, the Far East, the Middle East, etc. deal with working with governments as well as private institutions, and how they manipulate things in order to get their way to control such industries. Seeing the stories from as you would say, on the ground, firsthand, to seeing how it's controlled from a very high level, it's very interesting to see the discussions that are had and how the world reacts to it. But let's go straight into this. Prostate cancer, well, symptoms of cancer, you know some of them already. There are different types like brain cancer, there is genetic cancer syndromes, there is lung cancers, and various others, head and neck cancers, but we're going to focus on a male cancer. And who can it affect? It can affect anyone. Why? It's a change mutation to the DNA within the cells. And what causes the cancer? There are certain risks. Well, what causes the cancer? There is no single cause. I know as a scientist, as well as you know, that cancer can be caused by many factors that produce various different cancers, whether it's genetic, environmental, constitutional, character of the individual, at which then we have to make a diagnosis and treat it and prognosis. It can affect all of us. It can affect children as well as adults. And there are many risks that are involved, particularly with adults of a more senior age. But we also know that, as we discussed earlier, it's also about our lifestyle and our character. If we are open to taking in a lot of fatty foods, have a bad diet, a lot of toxic chemicals, then it will impact our lives. And these cancers can eventually come through. Other impacts are due to family history, inheritance, genetics that may be passed through. There are also important roles, and therefore can affect us personally within some of the genetic disorders that we may end up that alter our immune systems and so forth. However, what is your prostate? Men, the question. Do we know what prostate cancer is, first of all? Yes? Okay, we do. So prostate cancer is a very common cancer in men, and it's developed through the prostate glands. And normally it's recognised as a walnut-sized gland that sits deep in the pelvic, right beneath the bladder, and in front of the rectum. We know that most prostate cancers are slow growing, okay? So therefore it's not recognised straight away. I know that was the case with my dad, where he had slight pains. It was very subtle, but over time as they built up, he realised something was wrong. And the thing is, sometimes we can miss it because as men we don't talk, we're a bit proud. You know, I've just got a pain, but I'll be alright. I know that. I'm recovering from a Achilles injury, and I'm like trying to walk, but I know I'm in pain. So I know what we men are like. But we need to be in tune with our bodies, men. Wives need to tell your men to be in tune with their bodies, to make sure that they're recognising any changes and not to just put them aside. So how does prostate cancer develop? Well, we know that it develops when the genetic material in the cells change abnormally and the cells begin to grow out of control. But what then does your prostate do? In terms of its important functions, it is something that where the function is the production of the fluid that, together with the sperm cells from the testicle and fluids from other glands, make up the semen. And the muscles of the prostate also ensure that the semen is forcefully pressed into the urethra and then expelled outwards during ejaculation. So that's what it does. But how do we recognise these things? How do we recognise the various different symptoms? Men, the common symptoms you really need to know is this. When you're urinating frequently or having trouble, it may be because of an enlargement of your prostate. If you're starting to have pain in your pelvic area, then you need to start asking questions. If you've got some bone pain or there's a sudden unexplained weight loss, then you need to, I would suggest, go and speak to someone if you're having pain as well within that area. Because the thing is, if you leave it, it will spread and it will grow relatively quickly once it's developed. Okay. So, prostate cancer is becoming a problem, and it's not just, we're not seeing it just in kind of the more senior age within men. We're actually seeing that age reduce over time. And that's actually getting really scary. Because, it's as though gone are the days of we wait, and as we discuss with each other, and we say, we're getting old and the pains are coming, but actually no, the pains are here now, even for the children. So we need to really look out and help each other. So from an age perspective, this is reducing. As well as that, we need to also make sure we understand our families. Some of us come from big families, okay? And you know what that means. And sometimes we don't check with each other. What happened to Miss So-and-so and Auntie this and Uncle that and Dad and Gran? We need to understand our family histories. We need to know who had what and why. We have to be investigators, not just in the Bible, but in ourselves and each other. We need to know what the issues were and how we can make changes. When you're going to your GP, the first thing they're going to ask is, what is the problem and why? They want to understand where the history is going to, because sometimes not everything is written down. Yes, we believe our angels are writing everything down, but we certainly aren't. So we need to remember that communication of why, when did it start, and do the investigation ourselves, because it will help our physicians as well as ourselves understand why certain things have happened. The third story, my dad, who I gave a children's story this morning, and the first part of that was my dad, who I said has overcome prostate cancer through his various means. So what was quite significant about what he did was the changes he made were so significant that he actually refused some of the treatments that were available to him, because he realised where the issues were coming from. Certain medications that he'd been taking previously and other things like that, due to an event that had happened early on in his life, had kind of tipped him over the point. And it wasn't just that. As we say, stress is also a killer, and it can trigger other things in the body. He'd recognised this, and as a person who had studied in depth, had trained under some very prominent people in matters of health, as well as the areas within science and chemicals and so forth, he understood exactly how he needed to change it, what he needed to do, and he realised it wasn't going to be a short turnaround. So this is everything to do with your diet, the activity that you employ yourself in, how you communicate, how you hold yourselves in terms of your behaviour, your character. You have to make changes. If you're negative and sad all the time, your body's going to be impacted, okay? We have to smile more, we have to be brighter and happy, and all of these different things that God gave us. He gave us a smile for a reason. If we're not doing these things and we're just involving ourselves in the doom and gloom, we're not going to help our bodies to heal. My dad used to say, coming from backyard in Jamaica, he loved his chicken, he loved his fish, he loved to cook and fry up in the pot. I can tell you for the past, let's call it 20 years now, my dad stopped he stopped cooking all my favourite fried food. There was no more fried chicken, there was no more fried this and all of that, even the fried potatoes, no, all gone. Boiled plantain, hard food, you name it. Plenty of water. Some of you will know him for his juices that he does. Puts in a lot of healthy elements within there. Complete life reform, complete change. Can help reduce the illnesses that we have. It helped within his improvement from his prostate cancer. Race. It's stated that, researchers stated that race can have an impact in terms of our prostate cancer. It was stated that African American men are greater at risk of aggressive prostate cancers and developing prostate cancers at a younger age. Okay. But as you are seeing in society, it's not just that. Remember, our cultures and society also determines what we do. We are seeing people who are living in southern Asia and parts of Italy who are living longer life. Why is that? Lifestyle. So I know Alita's touched on some of these areas that are relative. So, types of prostate cancer: sarcomas, small cells, carcinomas, transitional cell carcinomas. They all affect us in different ways. Tumour size offers clues about how quickly the tumour may have developed and how likely it is to spread. This is something my dad recognised straight away once he knew the size of his tumour. When you go to the hospital, men, it's more likely they will give you a grade They will assign a numerical value between most likely 1 and 5, called the Gleason score. And this will give you an indication of how aggressive that cancer is. And it also gives you an indication of what you may need to do in order to slow that growth. Diagnosis. Once you know, you'll probably be given a diagnosis. It's known in the medical field as DRE, digital rectal examination, where your doctor will insert. I think most of you know. So I don't need to mention it, but it involves a glove. And it's not very nice for men, unfortunately. However, children, it's okay. But it'll give you an indication of how bad it is. Okay. You may have to go through a prostate-specific antigen test as well, where the blood test that's evaluated the amount of antigens in your bloodstream. Okay, so these are all things that you're likely to go through, and your doctor who specialises in cancers, whether it's a pathologist or other, may review you and give you your diagnosis. There are other areas which includes prostate imaging, that's linked to our radiology departments, who will give you a precise understanding of the cancer, the size and the schedules that may take place in relation to the diagnosis of your prostate cancer. And you may have to go through various different screenings as well. I have a lot of information, so I'm just trying to reduce everything very, very quickly. Okay? You may have to go through areas of prostate biopsy and other screening tests, as well as where blood is drawn as well through taking part in the prostate lab tests. So there are lots of different tests, stages and diagnosis that will occur over that time. As I've mentioned about tumour sites and other features such as lymph nodes, where cancers present in lymph nodes, and in how many other aspects, as well as metastasis, whether the cancer has spread and if so, where to. So these are all different stages that occur: the tumour size, the lymph node, the metastasis. And as I said, the Gleason score will give you an indication of how bad it is. Now, moving on very quickly, I know we can talk about this in more detail later. I know time is against us. However, common agents and onset. So what is this? What causes an early onset prostate cancer? Many research has been done into this. And more so, why is it happening? Why are younger men getting prostate cancer? Well, it seems to be that it's a link between the genes and the early prostate cancer, where research needs to be done, but it's also linked to things such as obesity, certain types of physical activity, HPV infections, and exposure to other environments that cause cancer growth and also play a role. So, how can we reduce your risk of cancer? As I said, we're repeating a lot of things because cancers seem to have certain commonalities. Which is why I'm so thankful God gave us a book, and He gave us everything in His environment of nature that can give us lessons of what to do when we become ill with such illness. So, principles of health. It's very, very, very important that we live a healthy lifestyle. As Adventists here, you will know that we as a community have established ourselves as people who have the written word in terms of a good health principle guide. It's been reported over the years, such as even back in 1959 by the American Cancer Society, that show Adventists seem to have information that can help resolve issues such as heart disease, strokes, cancers, and many other issues, including diabetes. Studies in Japan and the Netherlands and Norway also showed, having studied and gone through some of the books written by Ellen White, that they, in their words, unexpectedly found answers to help them within their research that would support improving areas of cancers. They particularly point out vegetarianism. What we eat is what we are. If you want to eat dead food all the time, death will come for you. I can't be any clearer than that. It also talks about exercise. Again, we've mentioned exercise. Types of exercise that will not overstress our body can help reduce your risk, particularly of prostate cancers, as well as I said, the meats, the fatty foods, the sugars, and all of those different things, the coffees that have the caffeine within them. They all hold elements that are not, irrespective of what some scientists want to believe, help our body. As I said, the combination between the studies done in Japan, Netherlands, Norway, and so forth were able to prove this. And mentioned quite stringently that the studies and the information presented by Ellen White in her books are amazing. And we should, by right, keep our eyes fixed and study them in depth, because they have the answers to some of the things that we are going through, the illnesses and ailments of today. Right, vitamin D, being active, plenty of fruits, plenty of vegetables. We even talked about nuts and so forth. Many chemical companies, particularly those who I have had communication with, have stated some of the resolutions for these diseases are held within what we eat, within the fruits and nuts of the land. The fibres and etc. that are in abundance, we need to make sure we're having them within the right quantity and not overexerting ourselves with certain types of food. A good diet is very, very important. So it's well known that from an Adventist traditional point of view, if we were to practice the lifestyles that we know we should and that we have promoting for how many years, we would be in a better state of health, particularly when it comes to, again, prostate cancer. I have so much more, but it's time's flying. So I'm going to move on very quickly. Okay. So if we know how we can reduce it, we know there are various different treatments that can help to manage it. And if we're to look at the hospital treatments, it's most likely you're going to go through one of the three, whether it's localized, locally advanced, or advanced. And why is that? It's because of the state of your cancer, your prostate gland, whether and how far it may have spread. So therefore, what can we do? Well, the hospital might decide to say it's at a certain stage, so we may have to move it. It may include something like an operation, as my dear surgeon here will tell you. She has probably done some of those in the past. Or other treatments. But there are other things that we can do, such as how we change our lifestyle through this transitional period when we learn. So for instance, we may reduce certain things like certain sugars, certain fats. We may even start to open our minds to different types of readings. There are so many aspects of life that impact our illnesses. As I said, it's not just about just a healthy lifestyle. We discussed in our lesson study this morning, it's about character, okay? If you have the right character, you will practice the right things. If you don't have the right character, your life will be impacted in one way or another. So the question then becomes, what is the right character to have? Which will help you to live in the right way. Eat the right food, do the right exercise, participate in the right things. So, there are different types of treatments that you may have. As I said, localized, locally advanced and advanced. You may have to go through external beam radiotherapy. You might have to go through intensity focus, ultrasound and so forth. These are all different types of treatments that you may have to go through. But what I'm going to say to you is this. I know I'm saying it over and over. Irrespective of going through these treatments that may be offered to you as men from the hospital, you will also have to make changes and treat your body in a different way, and your mind in a different way too. I'm not going to go into active surveillance and specialist activity, and various different side effects. There's so much. I'm going to move on. Natural methods. So, repetition. Johns Hopkins University and Hospital, Harvard University, Boston University, Columbia, Cambridge, Oxford, Imperial. They've all also presented reports over many years saying that there are natural methods, irrespective of these reports not being widespread. We know that Ministry of Healing tells us these same things. Improve your diet. Maintain a healthy weight. Weight has a big issue. If you're overweight, as we like to call it, you become more sluggish. It becomes harder to think. It impacts us in quite a big way. It can cause us to be more stressful. It can cause us to be less positive. I know what it's like. You can put on weight, and to get back to where you were feels so impossible, doesn't it? Some people say it is. I'll say nothing's impossible. I'll bring out the Bible text. But weight has a massive impact. I remember my dad, he worked so hard. He was the director for the company. A massive event actually happened. There was a chemical spill and all different types of things. Life had become good for him, having worked so hard. And the one thing he told me about when he was going through his journey with prostate cancer was this. He said to me this: of the 55 employees that worked under him, he was the only man standing after 5 years. 55 people. All of his employees, well, not his directly, but the company's employees under his management. 55. He's the last man standing. All died within 5 years. Most of them due to prostate cancer. Now we know that the chemical spill that occurred, you may be able to find reports in one of our British newspapers going back into the, I think it was the 80s or 90s, I can't be specific, I was a young boy at the time, anyway. But I remember him being ill. It was horrible. He suffered a lot of pain. His body weight gained, well, initially his body weight decreased, but then as he focused on what he knew best, he started to enjoy life, but then became overweight. And the prostate cancer essentially came. Now, he says if he hadn't have lost the weight, if he hadn't had stopped eating fried food and all of the nice things that he used to enjoy, if he hadn't stopped having the, and dare I say, too many bottles of malt. I know we love malt, it's Adventist. Some of us call it the Adventist beer. Super malt, let me rephrase. If any of you have had super malt and boiled it in a pan, you will see a very similarity to if you were to put Coca-Cola in a pan and boil it to its reduction. It looks like tar. You need to be careful what you're putting in your body. I know my dad still loves off super malt, but his intake definitely reduced. So, yes, again, maintaining a healthy diet. He had to lose the weight. He was out exercising again. He decided he was not going to go back to the work that he did before. He was going to focus on how he could help others to live a healthy and long life. Get regular exercise. My dad used to be a boxer, okay? And he represented his country, but then he became an Adventist, and that was that. But he's always been a fit man until he became ill. He's probably fitter than me now. But healthy exercise and the right type of exercise, not overexerting yourself, makes a huge difference to your mind, your state of mind, as well as your health. Getting that oxygen into your body, making sure you also get out into the countryside, have that fresh air, drink plenty of water, eat the fruits. If you want sugar, get a banana, right? Eat the grapes. You don't need to go to get gummy bears, kids, or milkshakes, or whatever it may be. You can get it from other things. You'd be surprised once you get into a habit of eating the nuts and grains of the land that they start to taste nice and sweet. And if you've grown them in your garden, mercy. My dad would tell me stories of before he came an Adventist. He reminds me of the days where you used to wear big flares and platforms and your hair was as high as the roof. And he would find himself in places on a Friday and Saturday night with his brothers and so forth, enjoying life to its absolute fullest. He knew where all the herbs of the land, and I'm not talking about the good herbs, I'm talking about herbs that sometimes could be declassified, could be found. He knew what life was to enjoy it. But then going back, he would tell me, was it worth it? Because I could have had just as much fun without having those things. Because they are things. Do you need to have a bottle of Coke when you can have fresh grape juice? Do you need to have a cheese stick when you can have a carrot stick instead? Serious questions, you know. I know kids love off cheese sticks. And they love of their sweets. But the thing is this, where you start may be where you end. And as I says, if it's not good, it's not going to end well either. So reducing in smoking, drinking, and other activities that are harmful to your body. And the thing is, we're at a point in time now where the companies are telling us what they are creating for us is bad for us, and they're labelling it. But we're still going and buying it. Increase your vitamin D. Many of you would have been born and brought up in the wonderful sunny lands. Many last week were saying that life is too harsh and horrible and the sun's killing me.
Not me.
Well, I mean, it's been a wonderful few years for weather in the UK, hasn't it? We've seen how levels of pollution were reduced, and we had sunshine, and when it rained, it poured. The plants grew to the point some of us may not have been able to keep up with our gardens. Mercy. But everything in moderation, as Lita says. You don't want to be in the sun, especially when there's no breeze. And as many in the country do, just strip off. And what was normal turns turkey and roasted. But it's not dinner time yet. And dinner time means eating dead something if it's a turkey. So, everything in moderation. It's good to get the sunshine, good to get vitamin D, whether it's from our fruits, whether it's from the sunshine and so forth, but in moderation. Go in and out. Be active. Don't just sit down, relax, hide, or be out and burn. In moderation. Stay active. Papers will tell you, especially when it comes to prostate cancer, that you should stay sexually active, but then there are questions over what type of sexual activity do they mean? Well, men. All I will say to you is, you know what the Bible says, and you know what it means in terms of God's plan to stay active in the proper and right way from a sexuality point of view. I won't go any further than that. Many questions have been raised, and we've just had a month of celebration for a group which may think very differently to some of that. But we who understand and who know must remember that what God gave us is true, and in everything He created is sit around His principles because it reflects His character. So I'm going to move on quickly and close. Why is this important? Well, first of all, in closing, I'm going to say, why is this important for us men, especially when looking at prostate cancer, the effects, the causes, the diagnostics, how we can reduce it, what we must do and change. Why is it important? Simply because the Bible says so. We have books, we have reports going back through the ages, whether it's from the spirit of prophecy, whether it's from the use of remedial agencies, ministry of healing, selected messages and so forth. We have everything we need to know in order to help us live a healthy lifestyle, and second of all, more importantly, know how to prevent some of the things that are in front of us. Lita did mention earlier on that my dad was up and about helping people. He was, because he understood what he needed to do, and when somebody was ill, exactly what to go to, whether it was a plant, a fruit or so forth, or not, that would help them get better from the ailment that they were receiving. Many people who had COVID, he had something for them. A couple of days, they were fine.
Wow.
We got it bad. I got it bad. really bad, Dad came to the rescue. Prayer. The first thing is prayer. Trusting and believing in God and what he has the answers for. It's not always the case that it will come out on the good end. We have to remember that. It's about God's timing and why. But he has the answers. And if you trust him, he will come through for you. There was something that I was reading the other day. Alita just asked me if I could support her with this. And I came across a document. It was written from a report with Mrs. White. This goes back to... It was a question that was asked, forgive me. So I'll just have to read it. What it said was this. Ellen White describes a situation where a friend of hers had breast cancer, and a member of the church had told her, what herbs should we take and not drugs? Is it true? We can ask ourselves the same question. Are we not to use modern technology to attempt the controls or eliminate cancers? This is a question for us also today. The report further goes on and it says this. I won't go through the whole of it because it is relatively long. But it says you have to ask yourself questions. There's a part of it in us where we know about modern technology, and some of us even know of the various cures that are there for cancer, while the majority of us don't. But what was important about this is that Mrs. White herself provides examples of what we can do. She developed, it further on goes to say she developed cancer, not Ellen White herself, but as I said, the lady, she developed a cancerous spot on her forehead in another example, and she had to have an X-ray treatment which killed off the cancer. You'll find a reference of this in Selected Messages on page 303, book 2. You see, Sister White was very balanced in her arguments. And we must remember that even now. Because sometimes what we tend to do as Adventists and as Christians, and as Alita mentioned in her response, we start to get sometimes a bit too proud and think, right, it's just I need a herb this and I need this and it's just this vegetable, and sometimes we are naive because it's not always the case. This is why we have to remind ourselves to look deep into a subject, to study, to understand why. And if you don't have the means or the ability to do that, we may have to take an alternative method. Ellen White also goes on to describe in her ministry that at her time there were 3 big drugs that were widely used medically, which was 1, opium, calomel, and nux vomica. You can read in Sister White's Selected Messages, book 2, pages 1441 to 454, where she gives an account of recognising how the impact of opium had on the person. She also went on to describe the impacts of the compounds of calomel and the compounds of mercury and other treatments that she considered hazardous materials and the effects that they had on them. She thirdly went on to describe nux vomica, which contains a poison of strychnine. Sorry, forgive me. Yes, strychnine. These were indeed poisonous drugs, and physicians gave them in large doses to such patients. You can only imagine what would have happened as a result of that. she says, we must remember that sometimes it is the context of the care that is given. Some conditions are temporary, some of the typical methods that the physicians of the time can be thrown out the window. God has given us everything we need in order for us to study his work and to study these ailments in order to find the right responses, results, products and things that we may need to counteract such issues and diseases. One thing she mentions is proper rest is very, very important. The right type of nutrition, the right type of air, exercise, and furthermore, the right type of support. There are natural remedies that she says can be taken, mainly effective in most cases. It is best for us to stay away from the drugs and the poisonous things that are sometimes given to us. They sometimes may counteract for a time. However, they do not, in the long term, cure our position, and furthermore, can have further effects on the body later down in time. She also goes on to give an account about the use of chemotherapy and its poisons. I have a lot, as I said. But what's interesting is she, as I said, she gives a balanced account of there are some technological solutions that could be used, but the mass majority of those that were being presented to patients suffering from cancers were not necessarily good for their bodies, particularly in the long term. So, in closing, we'll jump right to the end. If we know what changes we need to make, why don't we do them? Why are we still relying so stringently on the pharmacare? If we know that the Bible tells us in Revelation that pharmacare is going to be one of the greatest and most poignant acts that will deceive us in these end times. The thing is this, we know it, and more so, the people who own the industries also know it. They have provided us the research that proves it, as well as hidden away the research that they have done and prepared well in advance, because they know we know, if we were to truly believe. Harvard University, Boston University, Johns Hopkins, University of California, and so forth. There are plenty of them. These are names you will recognise. They did an investigation into the discoveries of new diseases and cancers. And what they stated within their report was collaborating with each other. They tried to come up with something which was opposing to Dr. Wendell Stanley's studies. For those who don't know Dr. Wendell Stanley, he was a university professor and virologist from the University of California who won a Nobel Prize. He believes, without qualification and strongly, that viruses cause most or all human cancers. And furthermore, he has proved that cancers can be cured. He has proved that cancers can be attacked. He has proved and shown through his work that cancers also can be suppressed in detail. So the question is, Why does the world still want us to believe that there is no cure and there is nothing that we can do apart from take its drugs to support its practice and boost its millions and billions that it receives year in, year in? We have all that we need. The question is what we will do with that information that we have in front of us, and who will we trust in? So, that's the end of the presentation. I have skipped through 75% of it. I'm sorry. You see, it's a tough subject for me because I have been through a living experience of 3 family members who have recovered from prostate cancer. It is an important topic to me because I have worked with institutions who I've known have created viruses and so forth that have impacted the world. I've seen it, I've been in their laboratories. It's a serious thing. What you are experiencing today is not something that just popped out of a bat or other. These things have been planned for years and years and years in advance. 2013, I was in a place called Cambridge, which you all know, and as I said, I had come out of a lab. We were working on something very, very, very important, and the only way I can explain it, because of a document I signed, was that the impact of the work being done then is only being used in its fullest capabilities now. And this was 10 years ago from when we were creating such things. You'll know about things like tracking and tracing. You'll know about the impacts of exposures to certain types of drugs and how to trace these around the world. I can tell you a lot of stories, factual stories that have happened and experienced. But as I said, 2013, I'd just come out of the lab. And I was heading home on the train. I picked up a newspaper, one of the top newspapers in our country. And it must have been halfway through that newspaper I saw a little snippet, right? Small paragraph. In that paragraph it said simply this: 40-something thousand people had died in a small village in Africa. I won't specifically say the place, but you can ask me afterwards. Through a test that had occurred to do with Ebola. I don't know if anybody read it. It only appeared in 2 papers. Tiny small snippet. I went back to my colleagues the following day. Guys, did you see it in the paper? They said, yes. Something don't sit well. Yes, something doesn't sit well with me either. In the laboratory next door to me, let's just say everything that had happened in that country was known next door. That's where I'll leave the story. We are battling between powers that are beyond anything we could imagine.
Yes.
Principalities. And our characters need to be right. We are living in a country where they have a hold and a grasp of the world and the activities, and within a small handful of people. And life is not going to get easier. And I can tell you over the next couple of months, you're going to start seeing things that have been planned for a long, long time in advance, which may surprise you. But we know that by having the right character, speaking to each other, sharing with each other truth, checking upon each other, showing a loving and faithful personality and character, that we will come through and be able to stand when those trials hit us. So thank you for sitting and being so patient. It's been a long time, and we will close there. If you have any questions, feel free to come to us afterwards. But yes, thank you. May God bless you.
One question, Simon. You know?
I was just going to say, if it was a Sherman, you would have long gone, but...
Yes, probably. I've seen it happen.
Yeah. Point you made regarding African Americans and prostate cancer. Would you say it has to do with race, ethnicity? Because then, if that what you're saying about the frequency of or the amount of individuals, more people, what about Black Africans, Black Caribbeans, and Black some other? Do you find that the same situation exists with prostate cancer? Because I've heard that same thing, but I heard it amongst Black men particularly, as opposed to just African American. But could you just elaborate on that?
Yes, so in terms of prostate cancer and how it affects different races, yes, it can. It can affect us differently as well because of just our kind of physiology, but at the same time we have to remember that, like Alita says, irrespective of where we're from in the world, you are subject to the different environments. You're subject to the different types of things that you eat, the sunlight, so you have to look at it from a wider picture. Where you are, what you do, your environment, everything impacts you. Your activity impacts you. So yes, you can say it also attributes to race. But at the same time, prostate cancer as well is prostate cancer, isn't it? A heart is a heart, a lung is a lung.
The reason I was asking that question because I'm just wondering if the trauma of slavery would have had any impact on, that race or that ethnicity.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that because the post-traumatic slave syndrome could be a part of the whole process of that for African Americans particularly. But I mean, it's something probably somebody will do some further research on.
Further research has actually been done on that, and they have said inherent aspects of the past has had a kind of it's contributed to kind of hereditary aspects through people. So a lot of these studies have been done, but sometimes we can't just point to one thing. This is why it says we need to know our history, we need to know where we're coming from, we also need to know who we are and what we're exposed to within our own environments. It's more than just one little thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just had a question. I just had a question. You say you work in and you've seen things.
Yes.
As an Adventist,
Yeah.
how do you feel about what you've seen in your work setting? Would you kind of challenge it? Or
Okay.
you say knowing that it's not sitting well with you?
Okay, so let's put it this way. When you're a child, you're learning new things. You don't quite fully understand. And as you grow, you start to learn about, through your education, through what you're doing, how everything's coming together and you become an adult. It's the same thing, it's like when you start a job that you haven't done before. These days, people come out of university and they think, right, the world's here waiting for me, I'm going to go into this career. As they start to progress through, they start to see things that open their mind to think, don't quite agree with that. For me and for the background that I came and was brought up around, I was able to spot that earlier, to the point where I had raised to a point in my career where I had to turn around to the company and say, actually, you're stepping on lines that if you cross it and you're caught. The problem is it would have fallen on my head. You have to as a person have a strong character, but more so if you believe in God and you believe in Him and trust Him, you've got to remove whatever ambitions you have. You've got to take it away. You've got to take it out. And you've got to say, it's not right, God, you're going to have to hold me now. I was put in that position where I had to turn around and say no. The impact it had on my life was immense. But God always provides.
Amen.
And He comes through. And as I says, it takes time, but once you start to investigate and start to understand, and you're answering these questions, particularly from what you've seen, from what you've learned, from what you've experienced, you're able to make better judgment calls. But make sure if you're doing it, seek God's guidance first. Because you can make decisions for yourself and it not be the right decision. And then you're in double trouble. Yeah. So that's what I would say to that. Sometimes you just won't know. The whole country in some respects was deceived over the past 3 years. To the extent at which they were deceived, if you understood, you probably would be in tears. But the fact is this: these things have to happen. So as Christians, we don't have to worry about them so much, because if we're putting all of our trust in God and following His principles, His lifestyle, His way, we'll be able to stand, irrespective of how bad it gets. Okay? So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but don't be afraid to stand up to say no. If something in your conscience is telling you no, it's wrong. Trust your conscience, trust God. Don't follow just because you think, because history has told us over and over again. They may just give you they'll dangle the carrot. You'll take it, but then they'll come back asking for a basket.
Right.
It always happens. What more can I say? Yeah, okay. Right, I think we'll leave it there. Shall we? Oh, okay. Come.
I just want to check that you. Right. What an afternoon. Yes, has everyone been blessed by the ministry from Doctors Facey? We do want to thank you so much for being with us from this morning, all the day, and I think we've all learned something. And I'm sure that there's probably some people with questions still, but yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure that if you've got any sort of like personal questions that you want to speak to them about, I'm sure they'll be willing, to stay behind and just respond to those questions. But can we just give them a hearty amen for their ministry? Amen. And we do wish you all the best as you continue. I think there's many people that need to hear about this, and I think that in terms of, as I said to Dr. Facey this morning, it was like almost like a old-fashioned type sermon that we had this morning. In terms of the sermons that we used to have 20, 30 years ago. I think a lot of things are sugar-coated nowadays, and sometimes we do need to hear messages, even if it's something that is going to knock you or whatever, but hopefully it's something that you can reflect on and that we can learn on and benefit. But it's not just to keep it to ourselves, we need to go and tell others about it. So once again, we just want to give you your thanks for just spending this time with us today. And I'm going to ask Elder Tumba if you would like to close us in prayer. Can we all stand, please?
Let us pray. Our Father and our God, we want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity you have given us to spend time fellowshipping with one another, studying your word. And Lord, we thank you for the work of the Holy Spirit has been with us. And we pray, Lord, that everything that we've learned today, it will change our lives, not just for this world, but it will prepare us for the world to come. In a special way, Lord, I want to pray for Dr. Facey, both of them. I want to put them before your throne of grace. I ask, Lord, that you may continue to bless them, to bless their ministry. Lord, as they continue working in your vineyard, may your glory be seen and may your name be lifted up. Be with them, be with their house, be with them when they get up, be with them, Lord, when they sleep. Be with them, Lord, whatever they touch, may it glorify you. We want to thank you for all the members, all the visitors who came from the community to come and be with us here. I want to pray for a special blessing to be upon them. Lord, bless their families. You know them individually. You know the struggles and the experiences that they're going through. And I know you, Lord, as a loving Father. And Lord, may you be the same to our visitors, especially those who are coming from the community. Lord, may this not be their last time here. May they feel free and come as we have an open door policy to join us here as we worship, as we discuss events that are happening in the world that are affecting everyone, including them, that they may be part of this family. Lord, as we dismiss from this service, I pray, Lord, that your Holy Spirit will guide us. But Lord, we will not be dismissed from your presence. Be with us as we start a new week. For we ask this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ and Savior. Amen.
Amen. And I'm not sure, Jen, can you confirm, have we got some light refreshments still? If we have cake? Okay, so there's still some light refreshments if anyone so desires. So thank you so much for attending, and by God's grace we'll see you here next week. Amen. Amen.